need a wife in 3 weeks, or I lose everything." The billionaire's voice cracked as he stood in the tiny matchmaking office, desperation bleeding through his expensive suit. Outside, Manhattan glittered with Christmas lights, but Adrian Keller's empire was crumbling. One impossible choice: marry a stranger to save his company, or watch 30,000 employees lose their jobs. The woman across the desk, Clara, with her worn cardigan and skeptical eyes, should have laughed him out. Instead, she said something that changed everything. "I don't do fake marriages, but I'll help you find something real. If you want to see whether a broke matchmaker can save a broken billionaire, stay until the end. Hit like and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels." The coffee had gone cold an hour ago. Adrian Keller stared at it anyway, watching the oily film congeal on the surface while his attorney droned through page 47 of the merger contract. The conference room smelled like leather and desperation, which was fitting because Adrian was running out of both time and options. And Clause 18 subsection D clearly states that any principal stakeholder must demonstrate stable personal circumstances prior to— "Say it in English, Morrison." His attorney looked up, startled. Richard Morrison had worked for the Keller family for 23 years and still flinched when Adrian used that tone. "They want proof you're settled, married, or at minimum, engaged." Morrison cleared his throat. "The Hong Kong partners are traditional. They've made it clear they won't sign unless— unless I have a wife." Adrian pushed the coffee cup away, watching it leave a wet ring on the mahogany table. Because a man who can negotiate a $2.3 billion merger obviously can't be trusted unless he's got someone to cook his dinner. It's not about trust, Adrian. It's about optics. Family values. The Lee family patriarch believes— I don't give a damn what he believes. But that was a lie, and they both knew it. Adrian gave a lot of damns, actually. 30,000 damns to be precise. One for each employee whose job depended on this merger going through. "When's the deadline?" Morrison hesitated. "They want an announcement at the Christmas gala. 3 weeks. "Jesus Christ. Your father thinks— My father can go—" Adrian stopped himself, pinching the bridge of his nose. "What does Charles want?" He's already compiled a list of suitable candidates. Women from appropriate families who understand the arrangement. Morrison slid a thin folder across the table. "He suggests you review these profiles and make a selection by—" Adrian stood up so fast his chair rolled backward and hit the window with a thud. 52 floors below, New York sprawled in its usual chaos, cabs honking, people rushing, everyone going somewhere that mattered. He used to be one of them. Now he spent his days in glass boxes making decisions that kept him awake at night. "Tell my father I'll handle it." "Adrian, I don't think you understand the urgency." "I understand perfectly." He grabbed his coat from the back of the chair. "I understand that everyone wants me married off like a prize racehorse so they can check a box on their paperwork. I understand that my personal life is apparently corporate strategy now. What I don't understand is why everyone thinks I'm incapable of solving my own problems." Morrison opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. "Your father is concerned. After Elizabeth— Don't." The word came out sharp enough to cut. "Don't bring her into this." "I'm sorry, I just meant— 3 years is a long time to—" "I said don't." The silence that followed was thick and uncomfortable. Outside, someone's phone was ringing in another office. Life continuing, oblivious. Finally, Morrison gathered his papers with careful precision. "The gala is December 21st. If you don't announce an engagement that night, the Lee family will walk. And if they walk, the merger collapses. And if the merger collapses, 30,000 people lose their jobs. I know. I've done the math." Adrian's jaw tightened. "I'll be there. With a fiancé. Satisfied? Your father will want to approve. My father can read about it in the Wall Street Journal like everyone else." He left before Morrison could argue, taking the private elevator down to the parking garage where his driver was waiting. The December air hit him like a slap when he stepped outside, cold and sharp, carrying the smell of roasted nuts from a street vendor and exhaust from the idling town car. "Home, Mr. Keller?" "No." Adrian climbed in, pulling the door shut against the noise. "Just drive. Anywhere. Marcus, who'd been driving him for 6 years and knew when to ask questions and when to stay quiet, simply nodded and pulled into traffic. They drove south through the evening rush, past store windows already decorated for Christmas, past couples walking hand in hand with shopping bags, past all the ordinary happiness that seemed to exist in a different dimension from Adrian's life. His phone buzzed approximately every 45 seconds. His father calling, probably. Or his assistant, or Morrison with yet another clause that needed reviewing. He ignored all of it. Somewhere around Union Square, Marcus made a turn Adrian didn't recognize. The buildings got shorter, the streets narrower. Brooklyn, maybe? Adrian had stopped paying attention to geography years ago. One part of New York was the same as another when you mostly saw it through tinted car windows. "Sir, there's something—" Marcus cleared his throat. "My wife used to talk about a place, when we were having troubles, before we sorted things out. A matchmaker. Old-fashioned kind of thing." Adrian looked up from his phone. "I'm not having troubles, Marcus. I'm having a corporate crisis." "Yes, sir. But you need a wife, don't you? And this woman, she's supposed to be different. Not like those dating services. She actually talks to people, listens. My wife swears by her." "Your wife is happily married. To you." "Wasn't always happy, sir. That's why she went." Marcus met his eyes in the rearview mirror. "It's just a suggestion. We're only a few blocks away." Adrian should have said no. Should have told Marcus to turn around and take him back to the penthouse, where his daughter was probably already asleep, watched over by the latest in a long string of nannies who never quite fit. Should have gone home and looked through his father's folder of acceptable candidates, women with the right pedigree and the right connections who would smile for the cameras and never ask what he was thinking at 2 in the morning. Instead, he heard himself say, "What's the address?" "Busag." The brownstone was squeezed between a dry cleaner and a bodega, the kind of building you'd walk past 100 times without noticing. The windows on the ground floor were lit with warm yellow light, and a small brass plaque beside the door read, "Moretti Matchmaking, established 1987. "This is it?" Adrian stared at the building, which looked about as corporate as a bakery. "My wife says the best things are always where you don't expect them." Marcus pulled up to the curb. "Should I wait?" Adrian checked his watch. 7:45. He had a meeting at 9 tomorrow morning, a conference call at 6 a.m., and approximately 18 years' worth of skepticism about anything involving the word matchmaking. "Give me 20 minutes. If I'm not out by then, I've probably been murdered, and you should call the police." Marcus actually smiled at that. "Yes, sir." The door wasn't locked. Adrian pushed it open and stepped into a small reception area that smelled like old books and lavender. The walls were covered in photographs, couples mostly. Wedding photos, anniversary parties, families. Decades of them, judging by the progression from black and white to Polaroid to digital prints. "Hello?" His voice echoed in the quiet. "Just a minute." The voice came from somewhere in the back, female and slightly frazzled. Hold on. Sorry, I'll be right there." There was a crash, followed by what sounded like muttered cursing in Italian. Then footsteps, and a woman emerged from the back room carrying a stack of files that looked about ready to topple. She wasn't what he expected. For one thing, she was younger, maybe 30, with dark hair pulled back in a messy bun and reading glasses sliding down her nose. She wore jeans and an oversized cardigan with a coffee stain on the sleeve, and when she saw him standing there in his $3,000 suit, she actually froze mid-step. "Oh, hi. Sorry, I didn't hear you come in. I was in the back trying to—" "It doesn't matter." She set the files down on the desk with a thud that sent papers sliding. "Welcome to Moretti Matchmaking. I'm Clara. How can I help you?" Adrian had been pitched to by some of the sharpest minds in business. He'd sat across from hedge fund managers and tech billionaires, and people who could buy and sell entire companies before lunch. He knew how to read people, how to spot the angle, how to see through the performance to what someone really wanted. But this woman standing there with her coffee-stained cardigan and her slightly crooked glasses, looking at him with an expression of genuine confusion, he couldn't get a read on her at all. "I need a wife," he said, because apparently his brain had decided honesty was the best policy at 7:45 on a Tuesday evening. Clara blinked. "I'm sorry?" "A wife, or at minimum, a fiancé, by December 21st. I was told you could help with that." Her expression shifted through several emotions too quickly for him to track them all, finally landing on something between amusement and concern. Okay, why don't you sit down, Mr. Keller? Adrian Keller. He waited for recognition, but her face stayed blank. Either she genuinely didn't know who he was, or she was a better actor than anyone he'd ever met. Right. Adrian, please sit. She gestured to a worn leather chair across from the desk, then started gathering the scattered papers with quick, efficient movements. Can I get you some coffee? Tea? I think I have tea somewhere, though it might be expired. I'm fine. Okay. She sat down across from him, pulled a yellow legal pad from a drawer, and clicked a pen. So, you need a wife by December 21st. That's 3 weeks from today. Correct. And you came to a matchmaker because I'm out of options. The words came out harsher than he intended, but Clara didn't flinch. I have a business merger that depends on me being married or at least engaged. The traditional methods haven't worked out. Traditional methods being dating, meeting people, the normal way people find relationships. He was aware of how ridiculous this sounded. I don't have time for normal anymore. Clara studied him for a long moment, pen hovering over the legal pad. Can I be honest with you, Adrian? Please. This sounds insane. Despite everything, the stress, the deadline, the sheer absurdity of sitting in this tiny office that smelled like someone's grandmother's house, Adrian almost laughed. You're not wrong. I mean, I appreciate that you're being straightforward about it. Most people come in here with stories about wanting to find their soulmate when really they just want someone to take to their sister's wedding or whatever. But a business merger? That's a new one. She set down the pen. Why not just hire someone? An actress or an escort or whatever you billionaire types do? How did you... Google autofilled your name when I typed Adrian K to check my email. You're apparently very rich and very private and very successful. Congratulations. Her tone wasn't impressed, which was also new. But you still haven't answered my question. Why are you here instead of hiring someone to play pretend? Adrian leaned back in the chair, which creaked alarmingly. Because it won't work. The people I'm dealing with, they're thorough. They'll investigate. And they're traditional. They'll smell a fake relationship from a mile away. I need something that at least looks real. Looks real, not is real. I'm being honest about what this is. Yeah, you are. Which is why I'm going to be honest right back. Folded her arms. I don't do fake marriages. I don't do arrangements. I don't help people check boxes or close business deals. My mother started this business to help people find actual human connection, not corporate solutions. Your mother? She died 2 years ago. Left me this place and about 40 years worth of client files and a philosophy I'm not about to abandon just because some billionaire walks in with a deadline. Her voice softened slightly. I'm sorry about your situation, Adrian. I really am, but I can't help you. He should have stood up. Should have thanked her for her time and walked out and called his father and picked someone from that folder of acceptable candidates. This was a waste of time anyway. What was he thinking, coming to a matchmaker? This wasn't a business problem you could solve with the right introduction. Except something about the way Clara was looking at him, not awed or impressed or calculating, but just seeing him. Like he was a person with a problem, not a headline or a bank account or a corporate asset. It had been so long since anyone looked at him like that. What if it wasn't fake? The word surprised him as much as her. What? What if I actually tried to meet someone? To find something real, I mean. I just need help doing it quickly. He was making this up as he went along, which was not how Adrian Keller normally operated. You said you help people find connections. Help me find one. Clara's eyes narrowed. In 3 weeks. I know it's not ideal. It's not remotely realistic. Real relationships take time. Trust takes time. You can't just manufacture chemistry on a deadline. But you could try, couldn't you? You could introduce me to people, set up dates, see if anything clicks. He could hear the desperation in his own voice now, which would have been embarrassing if he had any pride left. I'm not asking you to guarantee results. Just give me a chance. Why does this matter so much to you? Clara leaned forward, studying his face. It's just money, right? You probably have plenty of it. Why not let the merger fail? Because 30,000 people work for my company.
And if this merger doesn't go through, I'll have to make cuts. Massive cuts. Offices closed, positions eliminated. Families who depend on those paychecks, who've built lives around those jobs. He ran a hand through his hair. I know how it sounds. Rich guy problems. But those people aren't rich, and their problems are real, and I'm responsible for them whether I like it or not. The silence stretched between them. Outside, a car alarm went off, then stopped. The radiator in the corner hissed and clanked. Finally, Clara picked up her pen again. Tell me about your daughter. Adrian's head snapped up. How do you know I have a daughter? Google, remember? There was a photo from some charity thing. She looked about 5. Claire's expression was unreadable. What's her name? Sophie, she's 6. And what does Sophie think about Daddy getting married for a business deal? The question hit harder than it should have. She doesn't know, she's 6. She thinks I'm just very busy with work.
Right. Clara tapped the pen against the legal pad, a rapid rhythm that suggested she was thinking. Okay, here's what I'm willing to do. I'll introduce you to 7 women, real women, not paid actors or whatever you were planning. You'll go on actual dates with them, have actual conversations, see if anything genuine develops. 7 seems arbitrary. It's my lucky number, take it or leave it. She met his eyes. But here's the deal, Adrian, you have to actually try. No going through the motions, no treating this like a business meeting. You have to show up as yourself, not as billionaire Adrian Keller who needs to close a merger. Can you do that? Could he? Adrian wasn't even sure who he was anymore when he wasn't being billionaire Adrian Keller. That version of himself had been running the show for so long, he'd forgotten what was underneath. I can try, he said finally. Not good enough, yes or no? He thought about Sophie, asleep in the penthouse with whatever nanny was on duty tonight. Thought about the 30,000 employees whose names he didn't know, but whose livelihoods he signed off on every quarter. Thought about his father's folder of acceptable candidates and what his life would look like if he just picked one and went through with it. Then he thought about the way Clara was looking at him right now, like she could see through all of it to whatever was left underneath. Yes, he said. I'll actually try. Clara studied him for another long moment, then nodded. Okay, first date is Thursday night. I'll text you the details tomorrow. You don't have my number. She gestured to his phone, which was lighting up on the chair beside him. Something tells me you're very easy to get in touch with when people need you. Fair point. Adrian stood up and Clara stood too, shorter than he'd expected. The top of her head barely came to his shoulder. Thank you, he said, and meant it. Don't thank me yet. You might end up hating every single one of them. She walked him to the door, flipping off lights as they went. And Adrian? If you hurt any of these women because you're trying to solve a corporate problem, I will personally ensure everyone in New York knows exactly what kind of man you are. Clear? Crystal. Good. She opened the door, letting in the cold December air. Now go home to your daughter. Tell her a bedtime story or something. Be a person instead of a billionaire for 5 minutes. He wanted to tell her that he tried to do that every day and failed. That being a person felt harder than running a billion-dollar company. That some nights he stood in Sophie's doorway watching her sleep and wondering how he'd ended up so completely alone. Instead, he just said, I'll see you Thursday. You'll see whoever I set you up with Thursday. You won't see me. Clara pulled her cardigan tighter against the wind. I'm the matchmaker, not the match. Don't forget that. But as Adrian walked back to the car where Marcus was waiting, he found himself wondering if maybe Clara Moretti had that exactly backward. The penthouse was dark when he got home. Adrian let himself in quietly, setting his keys in the bowl by the door with barely a sound. The floor-to-ceiling windows showed Manhattan glittering below, millions of lights marking millions of lives being lived in ways that probably made sense to the people living them. He checked his phone. 11:47. Too late to wake Sophie, even though he wanted nothing more than to hear her voice, her ridiculous 6-year-old questions about why clouds floated or how come ice cream wasn't a vegetable. The nanny, Rebecca, Rachel, had left a note on the kitchen counter. Sophie ate all her dinner, homework done, asleep by 8, everything under control, as always. Adrian crumpled the note and threw it in the trash. The apartment was too big, too quiet, too much like a museum and not enough like a home. 16,000 square feet of marble and designer furniture and emptiness. He'd bought it 5 years ago when the company went public,
back when Elizabeth was still alive, and they talked about filling it with noise and chaos and a half dozen more kids. Now it just echoed. He poured himself 2 fingers of scotch and stood at the window, looking out at nothing. His reflection stared back. A man in an expensive suit who looked exactly like the kind of person who'd solve a personal problem with a business transaction. His father's son, in other words. The thought made him drink faster. His phone buzzed. A text from a number he didn't recognize. First date? Thursday, 7 p.m. The terrace at Bryant Park. Her name is Isabel. She's an attorney. Doesn't know who you are. Try to keep it that way for at least the appetizers. CM. Adrian stared at the message. Isabel. An attorney. Thursday. 3 weeks to find someone he could stand to marry, or at least pretend to marry long enough to close a merger and save 30,000 jobs. No pressure. He finished the scotch and went to check on Sophie. Her room was the only part of the penthouse that felt alive. Books scattered on the floor, stuffed animals arranged in what she insisted was a very important pattern, drawings taped to the walls. She'd kicked off her covers and was sprawled diagonally across the bed, clutching a worn teddy bear that had been Elizabeth's. Adrian pulled the covers back over her, careful not to wake her. She stirred anyway, blinking up at him with sleepy eyes. Daddy? I'm here, sweetheart. Go back to sleep.
You're late. I know. I'm sorry. It's okay. She yawned, already drifting off again. I made you a picture. It's on the fridge. He waited until her breathing evened out before going back to the kitchen. The picture was there, held up by a magnet shaped like the Statue of Liberty. A crayon drawing of 2 stick figures, one tall and one small, holding hands under a smiling sun. Me and Daddy, she'd written in wobbly letters across the top. Adrian stood there staring at it for longer than was probably reasonable. This crude drawing made by his daughter, who barely remembered her mother, who spent more time with paid caregivers than with him, who deserved so much better than a father who was considering fake marriages to solve business problems. He pulled out his phone and looked at Clara's message again. Thursday, 7 p.m. Maybe this was insane. Probably it was insane. But it was the only plan he had that didn't involve picking a stranger from his father's folder and lying about it for the rest of his life. He took a picture of Sophie's drawing and sent it to Clara's number. I'm trying, he typed, then deleted it, then typed, see you Thursday. Her response came almost immediately. Not me, Isabel. But yeah, see you then. Adrian set down the phone and looked back at the drawing. 2 stick figures under a smiling sun. Such a simple thing to want, and absolutely impossible to find in 3 weeks, probably. Oh. Thursday arrived faster than Adrian expected, which was how time seemed to work when you were dreading something. The days between had been consumed with emergency meetings about the merger, conference calls with attorneys, and increasingly aggressive voicemails from his father demanding to know what his plan was. Adrian ignored all of them and focused on work, because work he understood. Work had rules, contracts and clauses and things you could negotiate. Dating, apparently, did not. He'd Googled Clara's business during a particularly boring presentation about market projections. Moretti Matchmaking had a website that looked like it had been designed in 2003 and hadn't been updated since. There were testimonials from couples who'd met through Clara's mother, photos of weddings, a philosophy statement that rambled on about authentic connection and matching souls, not resumes. There was almost nothing about Clara herself except a small bio that said she'd taken over the business after her mother's death and was committed to continuing the legacy of bringing people together. No social media presence, no LinkedIn, no digital footprint except that ancient website, and a handful of reviews on sites people didn't really use anymore. It was like she existed in a different era entirely, which maybe explained why at 6:55 on Thursday evening, Adrian found himself approaching the terrace at Bryant Park, feeling like he was about to sit for a job interview he hadn't prepared for. The hostess checked her list. Reservation for Keller. There should be 2 of us. Ah, yes. Your party is already here, right this way. She led him through the restaurant to a table by the window, where a woman in her early 30s sat reading something on her phone. She looked up when Adrian approached, and he got his first good look at Isabel. Attractive, professional, exactly the kind of woman who'd be on his father's approved list if his father knew she existed. Adrian? She stood up, extending a hand.
I'm Isabel Chen. Nice to meet you.
You too. He shook her hand, firm grip, confident, and sat down. Thanks for agreeing to this. I know Clara can be, persuasive. Isabel laughed. She told me she had a client who was chronically overworked and emotionally unavailable but trying to change. I figured anyone that honest about their flaws deserved a shot. Chronically overworked and emotionally unavailable. Great first impression. Better than love's long walks on the beach and puppies, right? At least I know what I'm getting into. She flagged down a waiter. Should we get wine? I feel like we need wine for this. They ordered a bottle of something expensive that Adrian barely tasted, and then Isabel looked at him with an expression that was curious but not invasive. So, she said, what do you actually do? Clara was very mysterious about the details. Said you'd tell me yourself if you wanted to. This was the moment. He could lie, make something up, be anyone other than Adrian Keller, billionaire CEO, with a merger problem and a daughter at home, and enough baggage to fill a 747. Instead, he told the truth. I run a company, hotel and property development mostly. It's consuming. Consuming how? Like I can't remember the last time I took a full weekend off. Like my daughter's nanny knows her better than I do some weeks. Like I'm very good at making money and very bad at being present. He stopped himself. Sorry, that was probably too honest. No, I like it. Isabel poured them both more wine. I'm a corporate attorney. I bill 70 hours a week and haven't been on a vacation in 3 years. Consuming, I get it. The conversation flowed easier after that. Isabel was sharp and funny and remarkably easy to talk to. She told him about a case she'd just won, about her family in San Francisco, about the apartment she was renovating in Tribeca that was taking 3 times longer than the contractor had promised. Adrian told her about Sophie, about how she'd recently decided she wanted to be a dinosaur scientist when she grew up, about the chaos of trying to raise a kid in Manhattan when you barely had time to breathe. It was nice, comfortable, exactly what a first date should be, and Adrian felt absolutely nothing. Not Isabel's fault. She was wonderful, smart and successful, and the kind of woman his mother would have loved. But there was no spark, no chemistry, no moment where he thought, yes, this could be something. She seemed to sense it too. By the time dessert arrived, they'd both relaxed into the reality that this was a pleasant dinner between two people who would probably never see each other again. Clara's going to ask how it went, Isabel said, stirring her coffee. What should I tell her? The truth. That you're great, and I'm apparently broken. You're not broken, just busy. There's a difference. She smiled. For what it's worth, I think you'll figure it out. You seem like the kind of person who solves problems when you actually focus on them. This isn't really a problem you can solve with focus. Maybe not. But you're trying, right? That counts for something. They split the check, Isabel insisted, and said goodbye on the sidewalk outside the restaurant. She gave him a quick hug, the kind you'd give a colleague after a successful meeting, and then she was gone, disappearing into the Thursday night crowd. Adrian's phone buzzed almost immediately. How'd it go? Clara. He stood there on the sidewalk, watching people rush past him toward wherever they were going, and tried to figure out how to explain that he'd just had a perfectly nice date with a perfectly nice woman and felt more alone than when he started. She was great, he typed finally. Not the right fit. The response came fast. Date 2, Saturday afternoon, coffee shop in the West Village. Her name is Meredith. She teaches literature at NYU. Bring your brain, not your wallet. Adrian stared at the message. Saturday was 2 days away. He had 6 more of these to get through, 6 more chances to find whatever it was Clara thought he was looking for. He should have felt hopeful. Instead, he just felt tired. Saturday's date with Meredith was different in all the surface ways. Coffee instead of wine, afternoon instead of evening, a literature professor instead of a lawyer. But the result was the same. Nice conversation, no connection, polite goodbye. Sunday he took Sophie to the park because he'd promised her, and he was trying to be better about keeping promises. She ran around collecting leaves and inventing elaborate stories about them being magic forest treasure while Adrian sat on a bench answering emails. Daddy, you're not watching. He looked up. I'm watching, sweetheart. No, you're not. You're looking at your phone. I can do both.
She put her hands on her hips, Elizabeth's gesture, so perfectly mimicked it made his chest ache. That's not how watching works. So he put the phone away and actually watched. Watched her climb the slide ladder with careful determination. Watched her make friends with another kid in approximately 30 seconds. Watched her be 6 years old in a way that was already slipping past him too fast. When they got home, there was a message from Clara. Date 3. Monday night. Wine bar in Soho. Victoria. Investment banker. Try not to talk about work the whole time. Monday came. Victoria was impressive and intimidating and made it clear within the first 10 minutes that she had no interest in dating someone with a kid. They finished their wine in professional silence and parted ways. Tuesday. Adrian had to fly to Chicago for meetings. He sat in first class reading merger documents and thinking about how this was supposed to be different, this experiment Clara had designed. 7 dates, 7 women, 7 chances to find something real. 4 down, 3 to go. And nothing. Wednesday, he was back in New York, and Clara's message was waiting. Date 4. Thursday lunch, Italian place in Little Italy. Her name is Amanda. She's a curator at MoMA. Try to relax. Relax. Right. Because relaxation was definitely something Adrian Keller was known for. But he showed up Thursday at noon anyway, because he'd said he'd try and he was, against all odds, still trying. Amanda was already there when he arrived, studying the menu with the kind of focus most people reserved for legal contracts. She looked up when he sat down and gave him a smile that was warm but measuring. "So you're the mysterious client Clara keeps talking about," she said. "She told me you needed help reconnecting with your humanity. Should I be concerned?" "Probably." They ordered pasta for her, risotto for him, and Amanda launched into stories about the museum, about artists she'd worked with, about a new exhibition that was causing controversy because apparently modern art was still capable of offending people. She was fascinating. Passionate about her work, opinionated, completely unimpressed by wealth or status or any of the things that usually made people treat Adrian differently. And still, nothing. Adrian picked at his risotto and wondered what was wrong with him. 4 intelligent, accomplished, interesting women, and he couldn't manufacture even a hint of chemistry with any of them. "You're not really here, are you?" Amanda said it without judgment, just observation. "I'm sorry, I'm trying to be present. It's fine. Clara warned me you might be like this." She sipped her wine. "Can I ask you something? Why are you doing this? The matchmaking thing. You don't seem like the type who needs help meeting people." Adrian set down his fork. "It's complicated. That's what people say when they don't want to explain." "Fair enough." He took a breath. "I need to get married. For business reasons. By the end of the month. And I wanted it to be real, or at least real-ish, instead of completely transactional, so I asked Clara to help." Amanda's eyebrows went up. "By the end of the month. That's ambitious. That's one word for it. And you thought speed dating through Clara's client list would lead to true love?" When she put it like that, it sounded even more insane than it was. "I thought it was worth a shot." "Huh." Amanda considered this, twirling pasta on her fork. "You know what your problem is? I have a feeling you're about to tell me. You're looking for a solution instead of a person. That's why nothing's clicking. You're sitting across from these women trying to figure out if they check the boxes, not whether you actually like them." She pointed her fork at him. "Clara's trying to help you find something real, but you're still treating it like a business deal." The words hit harder than they should have, mainly because they were true. "I don't know how else to approach it," Adrian admitted. "I've been thinking like a businessman for so long I'm not sure I remember how to think like anything else." "Then maybe that's what you need to figure out first, before you try to find someone to marry you." Amanda finished her wine and signaled for the check. "Look, you seem like a decent guy in a complicated situation, but until you actually want a relationship instead of a merger, you're wasting everyone's time, including your own." They parted ways outside the restaurant with a handshake and mutual understanding that this was going nowhere. As Adrian watched her disappear into the lunch crowd, he pulled out his phone and stared at it for a long moment. Then he called Clara. She answered on the 3rd ring. "How was Amanda?" "She was great. Like all of them have been great. That's not the problem." "Then what is?" "Can I buy you a coffee? I think we need to talk." There was a pause. I thought I made it clear I'm not one of the dates. I know, I'm not asking you on a date. I'm asking for help. There's a difference. Adrian started walking, not sure where he was going, but needing to move. Please. Another pause, longer this time. Then, there's a coffee shop 2 blocks from my office. Pete's. I'll be there in 20 minutes. But Adrian? Yeah? This doesn't change anything. I'm still just the matchmaker. I know, he said. But he wasn't entirely sure either of them believed it anymore. Pete's Coffee looked like every other independent coffee shop in Manhattan. Exposed brick, mismatched furniture, the kind of aggressively quirky decor that was supposed to feel authentic, but mostly just felt trying too hard. Adrian got there first and claimed a table in the back corner, away from the window where someone might recognize him. He was on his second espresso when Clara walked in. She looked different than she had in her office. Less frazzled, maybe. She'd traded the coffee-stained cardigan for a peacoat that had seen better days, and her hair was down instead of pulled back. She spotted him immediately and wove through the tables with the kind of efficient movement that suggested she spent a lot of time navigating crowded spaces. "You look terrible," she said by way of greeting. "Hello to you too." "I'm serious. When's the last time you slept?" She sat down across from him, unwinding a scarf that might have been hand-knitted. "Let me guess. You've been up since 4 doing merger stuff." "5, actually. And how did you have that look? My father used to get it when tax season hit, like you're running on caffeine and spite." She flagged down a barista. "Can I get a latte? Thanks." Then back to Adrian. "So, what's the emergency?" He'd been rehearsing what to say on the walk over, trying to find the right words to explain that he was failing at something that shouldn't even be this hard. But now, sitting across from Clara in this overcrowded coffee shop with terrible jazz playing too loud in the background, all those rehearsed words evaporated. "I think Amanda might have been right," he said instead. "About what? About me treating this like a business deal instead of actually trying to meet someone." He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit he'd never managed to break. 4 dates, Clara, 4 intelligent, interesting women, and I felt nothing. Not their fault, they were all great. But I sat there making mental checklists instead of actually being present, and I don't know how to stop. Clara's latte arrived. She wrapped both hands around it like she was cold, even though the coffee shop was overheated. What kind of checklists? Stupid things. Whether they'd fit into my world, whether they'd be okay with the travel schedule, the weird hours, the media attention, whether Sophie would like them, whether my father would approve, or whether the Hong Kong partners would find them acceptable, or... He stopped himself. "See? I'm doing it right now, treating people like variables in an equation. That's not necessarily wrong," Clara said carefully. "Those things matter. Compatibility matters. But yeah, you're skipping a pretty important step." "Which is?" "Actually giving a damn." She took a sip of her latte, made a face that suggested it was too hot. "You're so focused on the outcome that you're not paying attention to the process. You're not asking yourself if you enjoy talking to these women, if they make you laugh, or think differently, or feel something you haven't felt in a while. You're just checking boxes." Adrian slumped back in his chair. "I don't know if I remember how to do anything else. When's the last time you went on a real date? Before all this?" The question shouldn't have been hard to answer, but Adrian found himself reaching back through years of fundraisers and business dinners and obligatory +1 situations, trying to find something that qualified as real. "Before Elizabeth died," he said finally. "So, 3 years." Clara's expression softened. "Clara didn't mention you were widowed." "You're Clara. You know what I mean, the files. My mother's notes." She set down the latte. "I'm sorry. That must have been incredibly hard." "It was a long time ago." The lie came automatically, even though 3 years felt like both yesterday and a lifetime ago simultaneously. "Grief doesn't work on a timeline, Adrian." "No, but business deals do. And right now I've got 2.5 weeks to figure this out, or 30,000 people lose their jobs." He heard the edge in his own voice and tried to soften it. "I'm not looking for therapy. I'm looking for practical solutions." Except there isn't a practical solution to finding a real connection. That's kind of the whole point. Clara pulled out her phone, scrolled through something. "You've got 3 dates left. Candidates 5, 6, and 7. I can schedule them, you can go through the motions, and maybe something clicks. Or? She looked up from her phone, and Adrian couldn't read her expression at all. Or we try something different. Different how? I don't know yet. Let me think about it. She started to stand up, then paused. Can I ask you something? And I need you to be honest. Okay. If the merger wasn't at stake, if you didn't have this deadline hanging over you, would you even be doing this? Looking for someone, I mean. The honest answer was probably no. The honest answer was that Adrian had gotten comfortable with loneliness, had built his life around it, had convinced himself that being alone was easier than risking the kind of loss he'd felt when Elizabeth died. But that answer felt too raw to say out loud in a coffee shop on a Thursday afternoon. I don't know, he said instead. Clara nodded like she'd expected that. That's the problem we actually need to solve, not the merger. You. I hired you to help me find a wife, not fix my emotional baggage. Yeah, well, turns out those two things are pretty connected. Weird how that works. She pulled her coat back on. I'll call you later, maybe tomorrow. Don't schedule anything for Saturday afternoon. Why not? Because I'm going to need you to trust me. She wrapped the scarf around her neck. Can you do that? Adrian thought about the last time he'd really trusted anyone with anything that mattered. Thought about how that had worked out. Thought about how he didn't have a lot of other options at this point. Yeah, he said. I can do that. Clara studied his face for a moment, then nodded once and left without saying goodbye. Adrian watched her go, this woman in her worn peacoat who somehow saw through every defense he'd spent years building and wondered what exactly he'd just agreed to. His phone buzzed, a text from his father. Lunch tomorrow. The club. Don't be late. Adrian deleted it without responding. Charles Keller didn't do casual lunch. Every meal was a production. Every conversation had an agenda. Every moment was an opportunity to remind everyone in the room exactly who held the power. So when Adrian arrived at the Metropolitan Club the next day, he wasn't surprised to find his father already seated at their usual table, a scotch in front of him despite it being barely noon. You're late, Charles said without looking up from his phone. By 3 minutes. Punctuality is respect. I taught you that. Adrian sat down and ordered water from a hovering waiter. What did you want to talk about? The merger. What else? Charles finally looked at him, and Adrian saw the calculation in his eyes. The same look he'd been seeing his whole life whenever his father was about to corner him into something. Morrison tells me you're handling the engagement situation yourself. That's right. Care to elaborate? Not particularly. Charles's jaw tightened. This isn't a game, Adrian. The Lee family expects an announcement at the gala. That's 2 weeks from now. I need to know you have a plan. I have a plan. Which is? I'll announce an engagement at the gala. Adrian kept his voice level, refusing to rise to the bait. That's what you wanted, isn't it? I wanted you to choose someone appropriate. Someone who understands our world. Someone who can handle the scrutiny that comes with the Keller name. Charles leaned forward. I gave you a list of suitable candidates. Have you even looked at it? I've been busy. Busy with what? Morrison says you've been disappearing every few nights. Mysterious dinners, unexplained absences. His father's eyes narrowed. What exactly are you up to? Adrian could have told him the truth. That he was going on dates arranged by a matchmaker who worked out of a brownstone that probably violated about 15 building codes. That he was trying, in his own completely incompetent way, to find something real instead of something convenient. That for the first time in 3 years, he was actually attempting to move forward instead of just going through the motions. Instead, he said, I'm handling it. That's all you need to know. That's not good enough. It's going to have to be. The silence that fell between them was familiar. The same weighted quiet that had defined their relationship for as long as Adrian could remember. His father expecting obedience, Adrian refusing to give it, both of them locked in a pattern neither knew how to break. Your mother would be disappointed, Charles said finally, playing the card he always played when nothing else worked. Don't. Adrian's voice came out harder than he intended. Don't bring Mom into this. She had standards. She understood what it meant to be a Keller. She would have expected you to make a choice that honored the family, not chase after whatever. Mom died when I was 19. You don't get to speak for her. Adrian stood up, throwing his napkin on the table. I said I'd handle it, and I will. But I'm done taking orders from you on who I should marry. Adrian. I'll see you at the gala. He left before his father could respond. ignoring the stares from other diners who'd probably heard more than they should have. Outside, the December cold hit him like a physical thing, sharp enough to hurt. His phone rang before he'd made it halfway down the block. Clara. "Hey," he answered, still walking, needing to move. "Bad time?" "Just had lunch with my father, so yes, bad time. What's up?" "Saturday afternoon. I need you to meet me at my office at 2. Her voice was brisk, businesslike. "Wear something comfortable. We're taking a field trip." "A field trip where?" "It's a surprise. Do you trust me or not?" Adrian thought about his father's face across the table. The same conversation they'd been having for years. The same expectations and disappointments running on an endless loop. Thought about 4 failed dates and 2.5 weeks, and the growing certainty that he was going to spectacularly fail at this whole thing. "Yeah," he said, "I trust you." "Good. 2 o'clock. Don't be late." She hung up before he could ask any more questions. Adrian stood there on the sidewalk, people flowing around him like water around a stone, and wondered what he was getting himself into. Saturday arrived cold and bright, the kind of December day that made Manhattan look almost magical if you ignored the slush and the traffic and the general chaos. Adrian spent the morning with Sophie at a pottery painting place she'd been begging to try, watching her create what she insisted was a beautiful bowl, but looked more like a lumpy disaster. "It's perfect," he told her, "because that's what you told 6-year-olds about their art. You're just saying that." "I'm serious. Very abstract. Very modern." She squinted at him. "You don't know what abstract means." "How dare you? I know exactly what abstract means." "Then what does it mean?" He was saved from having to answer by his phone alarm, reminding him he had 20 minutes to get to Claire's office. Sophie pouted when he told her they had to go, but the nanny, Jennifer, he'd finally learned her name, was waiting at the penthouse to take over. "Where are you going?" Sophie asked as he kissed the top of her head goodbye. "I have to meet someone for work." "You're always meeting someone for work." The accusation stung more than it should have. "I know, sweetheart, but this is important." "More important than me?" Adrian crouched down to her level, taking her paint-stained hands in his. "Nothing is more important than you. You know that, right?" She shrugged, not meeting his eyes. "Jennifer says you're very busy saving the company." "Jennifer talks too much." He tilted Sophie's chin up gently. "Hey, look at me. Yes, I'm busy. Yes, I have to work a lot. But you're the most important thing in my life. Always. Deal?" "Deal." She hugged him quickly, then pulled away. "Can we get ice cream tomorrow? Even though it's winter? Especially because it's winter. That's when it tastes best." He had no idea where she got these ideas, but he loved her for them. "Ice cream tomorrow, I promise." The cab ride to Clara's office took longer than it should have because of Saturday traffic, and Adrian spent it answering emails and trying not to think about what field trip might mean. When he finally arrived, Clara was waiting outside the brownstone, wearing jeans and boots and a jacket that actually looked warm instead of fashionable. "You made it," she said. "I was starting to think you'd bail. I said I'd be here." "Yeah, but rich people say a lot of things they don't mean." She started walking before he could respond to that. "Come on, we're taking the subway." "The subway? You know, the train that runs underground, carries millions of people every day? That's Subway." "I know what the subway is. I just haven't taken it in. Years, I'm guessing. Don't worry, it's mostly the same. Dirty, crowded, smells weird. Very authentic New York experience." She was already heading down the street toward the nearest station. Adrian followed, feeling bizarrely out of place in his designer jeans and coat that probably cost more than most people's rent. "Where are we going?" "You'll see." The subway was exactly as Clara described, dirty, crowded, smelling like a combination of hot metal and human desperation. Adrian couldn't remember the last time he'd been packed into a train car with this many people, all of them living their lives in close proximity, an accidental intimacy that felt almost aggressive. Clara, meanwhile, seemed completely comfortable. She held on to the pole with practiced ease, swaying with the movement of the train, occasionally checking her phone. A woman next to her was reading a romance novel with an embarrassingly shirtless man on the cover. 2 teenagers across the way were arguing about basketball. An old man at the end of the car was singing softly to himself. This is your world, isn't it? Adrian said, keeping his voice low. Clara looked up from her phone. What? This. Real people living real lives, not boardrooms and penthouses and private cars. It's just the subway, Adrian. Don't romanticize it. But she was smiling a little. Although, yeah, I guess this is more my speed than whatever you're used to. They got off at West 4th Street and emerged into the village, which was packed with Saturday shoppers and tourists and NYU students who all seemed incredibly young. Clara led him through a maze of streets until they stopped in front of a small storefront with a hand-painted sign that read Books and Brew. A bookstore? Adrian looked at her. Not just a bookstore, the bookstore. My favorite place in the city. She pushed open the door, and the smell hit him immediately. Old paper and coffee and something vanilla, maybe candles. Come on. Inside was cramped and chaotic, books stacked on every available surface in a system that probably made sense only to whoever worked there. There was a coffee counter in the back, a few mismatched armchairs scattered around, and absolutely no regard for modern retail design principles. It was also completely packed. Clara! A man behind the coffee counter waved. Haven't seen you in weeks. Been busy, Marco. The usual? You got it. He started making what was apparently Clara's usual order, then noticed Adrian. Who's your friend? This is Adrian. He's a project. Clara was already moving deeper into the store, running her fingers along spines like she was greeting old friends. Adrian, this is Marco. He makes the best cappuccino in New York and has terrible taste in music. My taste in music is evolved, Marco called after her. You just don't appreciate real jazz. Clara ignored him, pulling a book off a shelf and flipping through it. Adrian stood there, feeling completely out of his element, which he suspected was exactly the point. Why are we here? He asked when he caught up to her in the fiction section. Because this is my reset button. When I need to remember why I do what I do, I come here, read for a while, drink overpriced coffee, talk to Marco about books I'll never have time to finish. She shelved the book she'd been looking at and grabbed another one. You need a reset button. I have a reset button. It's called Scotch. That's not a reset button. That's avoidance. She handed him the book, something literary with a cover that was all muted colors and sophisticated font. When's the last time you read something that wasn't a merger document or a bedtime story for Sophie? Adrian looked at the book in his hands. The cover copy mentioned something about a man rebuilding his life after loss. Subtle, Clara. Real subtle. I don't have time to read. Everyone says that. It's never actually true. She grabbed her coffee from Marco, some complicated-looking thing with foam art on top, and settled into one of the armchairs. Sit. Read. Practice being a person instead of a CEO for 20 minutes. This is your big plan? Bringing me to a bookstore? Part of it, yeah. She opened her own book, clearly done explaining herself. Adrian stood there for a moment, aware of how ridiculous this was, how he should be back at the office working on the 100 things that needed his attention. But Clara had already gone back to reading, completely unconcerned with his internal debate, and something about her certainty made him sit down in the chair across from her. He opened the book. The first chapter was about a man whose wife had died. Of course it was. Adrian almost closed it immediately, but then he kept reading, and the words pulled him in despite himself. The way the author described grief, not as this tragic, overwhelming thing, but as a quiet, constant companion, something you learn to carry, felt uncomfortably familiar. He was 3 chapters in when Clara spoke. Better? Adrian looked up, disoriented. The coffee shop had gotten more crowded, the noise level rising. His coffee, Marco had brought him one without asking, had gone cold. Better than what? Than you were when you got here. You looked like you were about to vibrate out of your skin. Now you look almost relaxed. She marked her place in her book. That's the thing about books. They give you permission to stop performing for a while. I wasn't performing. Adrian, you're always performing? CEO Adrian, dutiful son Adrian, grieving widower Adrian, overwhelmed single dad Adrian. You've got more roles than a Broadway actor. She set her book aside. But here, in a bookstore where nobody knows who you are or cares about your merger, you get to just be Adrian, regular guy reading a book. I'm not a regular guy. Yeah, you are. You just forgot. Clara stood up, stretching. Come on. Part 2 of today's field trip. There's more? Did you think I'd drag you to Brooklyn for just a bookstore visit? Have some faith. They left books and brew and walked for another 10 minutes, Clara leading the way with the confidence of someone who knew these streets like her own home. They ended up at a small park Adrian didn't recognize, just a patch of green with some benches and a view of the water. It was quieter here, away from the main streets. A few people walking dogs, a jogger going past, but mostly empty. Clara sat down on a bench facing the water, and Adrian sat next to her. I used to come here with my mom, she said after a moment. Every Sunday after church, we'd get bagels and sit right here. She'd tell me about the couples she was working with, the ones who were struggling, the ones who were doing great. She never used names, obviously, but she'd talk about the patterns she saw. The things that made relationships work or fall apart. What patterns? Lots of them. But the biggest one? People who were honest about what they actually wanted did better than people who were trying to want the right things. Clara turned to look at him. You're trying to want the right things, Adrian. A wife who fits your world, who won't cause problems, who can handle the pressure. But you're not asking yourself what you actually want. I want to not fail 30,000 people who depend on me. That's not the same thing as wanting a partner, a relationship, someone to come home to. She pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. My mom used to say that the best matches weren't about compatibility on paper. They were about finding someone you wanted to tell things to, someone who made the boring parts of life less boring, someone who saw the messy real you and stuck around anyway. Adrian thought about Elizabeth, about how she'd known exactly how he took his coffee and which tie he hated and when he needed silence versus when he needed to talk. About how she'd made their tiny first apartment feel like home just by being in it. About how he'd never found that with anyone else because he'd never tried, because trying meant risking losing it again. I'm not sure I know how to do that anymore, he admitted. Yeah, I'm starting to figure that out. Clara was quiet for a moment. Can I tell you something? And you can't get mad. That's not a promising start. I don't think you're going to find what you need in the next 2 weeks. I don't think anyone could. She held up a hand before he could respond. I'm not saying give up on the dates. You've got 3 left, and who knows, maybe one of them clicks. But I think you need to accept that there's no perfect solution here. No magic answer that saves the merger and gives you a real relationship and makes everything work out. So what am I supposed to do? Stop trying to solve it like a business problem. Start making choices based on what you actually want instead of what you think you should want. She turned to face him fully. And maybe, and I know this is crazy, but maybe consider that failing at the merger wouldn't be the end of the world. Your employees would find other jobs. Your father would get over it eventually. Life would go on. Easy for you to say, it's not your responsibility. You're right, it's not. But it's also not your whole identity. You're not just the company, Adrian. You're also a dad and a person and someone who used to have interests beyond quarterly reports. She stood up. I'm not saying abandon everything. I'm saying stop letting it crush you. She started walking, and Adrian followed, his mind churning through everything she'd said. They walked in silence for a while, winding through Brooklyn streets as the afternoon light shifted toward evening. I have one more date scheduled for you, Clara said eventually. Tuesday night. Her name is Rachel. She's a chef. Runs her own restaurant in Queens. Okay? And Thursday, if you're willing, there's someone else. Number 6. What about number 7? Clara stopped walking. I'm still working on number 7. She's complicated. Complicated how? Just trust me. She checked her phone. It's almost 5. You probably need to get back to Sophie. She was right. Jennifer had texted twice asking when he'd be home. But Adrian found himself not wanting this afternoon to end, this strange break from his regular life where he'd read in a bookstore and sat by the water and talked about things that mattered instead of things that were just urgent. Thank you, he said, for today, for all of this. Don't thank me yet. You might still hate how this turns out. But Clara was smiling. Get home to your daughter, Adrian. Make her dinner. Be present. Practice being a person. You keep saying that. Practice being a person. Because you need the practice. She pulled out her phone to call a car. I'll text you the details about Tuesday. Rachel's restaurant is in Astoria. Take the subway. I have a driver. Adrian? Fine. Subway. I'll take the subway. Clara's car arrived first, some rideshare with a driver who looked barely old enough to have a license. She climbed in, then looked back at him through the open window. "You're doing better than you think," she said, "in case nobody's told you that lately." Then she was gone, the car disappearing into traffic, and Adrian was left standing on a Brooklyn street corner as the December evening settled in cold and clear. He pulled out his phone to call his own car, then stopped. Instead, he found the nearest subway station and took the train home, packed in with everyone else heading back from their Saturday adventures. It took twice as long as a car would have, and his feet hurt by the time he got back to the penthouse. But something about it felt right, felt real. Sophie was building an elaborate fort out of couch cushions when he walked in. "You're home!" She ran over and hugged his legs. "Jennifer said you might be late." "I'm not late. I'm exactly on time." He kissed the top of her head. "What do you want for dinner?" "Can we make pancakes?" "For dinner?" "You said nothing's more important than me. So if I want pancakes for dinner, we should have pancakes for dinner." She deployed 6-year-old logic with devastating effectiveness. "Can't argue with that." Adrian shed his coat. "But you have to help me make them." "Deal." They made a mess of the kitchen, flour everywhere, Sophie insisting on cracking the eggs herself, which resulted in shells in the batter that Adrian had to fish out. The pancakes came out lumpy and irregular and absolutely perfect, and they ate them at the kitchen counter while Sophie told him elaborate stories about the fort she was building. It was the best evening Adrian had had in months. Later, after Sophie was in bed and the kitchen was mostly cleaned and Adrian was sitting alone with the usual stack of documents that needed reviewing, his phone buzzed. A message from Clara. Just a photo. The book he'd been reading at the coffee shop with a note that said, "Marco says you left this. He's holding it for you. You should go back and finish it." Adrian stared at the message for a long moment. Then he replied, "Maybe I will." The 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, good. Everyone needs a reset button. He set down the phone and looked around the penthouse, at Sophie's drawings on the fridge, at the fortress of couch cushions still standing in the living room, at the life he'd built that was both everything and nothing like what he'd planned. Tuesday, he'd meet Rachel the chef. Thursday, candidate number 6. And then number 7, whoever she was, whatever complicated meant. 3 more chances to find what everyone kept telling him he needed. But sitting there in the quiet penthouse, Adrian found himself thinking less about those dates and more about a bookstore in the village, a bench by the water, and the woman who kept insisting he was more than just his title. The woman who was just the matchmaker who somehow saw him more clearly than anyone had in years. He picked up his phone again, scrolled to Clara's contact, and stopped himself from typing the message that was forming. Because that way led somewhere he wasn't ready to examine yet, somewhere that felt both terrifying and inevitable. Instead, he opened his laptop and tried to focus on work. But for the first time in a long time, the work felt less important than what he was avoiding thinking about. And Adrian Keller, who'd built an empire on always knowing exactly what he wanted and how to get it, had absolutely no idea what to do with that. Tuesday came with freezing rain that turned the streets into a mess of slush and misery. Adrian spent most of the day in back-to-back meetings about the merger, listening to attorneys argue about language and clause after clause while his mind kept drifting to other things. The gala was 10 days away. 10 days to announce an engagement he didn't have to people who'd scrutinize every detail. Morrison cornered him after the last meeting, clutching a folder that Adrian already knew he didn't want to see. "Your father asked me to follow up," Morrison said, not quite meeting Adrian's eyes. "About the announcement. He wants to coordinate with PR, get the messaging right, make sure, tell my father I'm handling it." "Adrian, he's concerned. We all are. The Lee family has made it very clear that if you don't..." "I know what they've made clear. I was in the same meeting you were." Adrian grabbed his coat. "I have somewhere to be." "It's 7:30 on a Tuesday night." "Your point?" Morrison hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "Look, I've known you since you were a kid. I watched you build this company from the ground up after your mother died. I know how much it means to you. But this approach you're taking, whatever it is, it's making people nervous." "What approach?" "The secretive one. The refusing to communicate one. Your father thinks you're self-destructing." "My father thinks any decision he doesn't control is self-destruction." Adrian pulled on his coat. "I'll make the announcement at the gala. That's all anyone needs to know." He left before Morrison could argue further, taking the elevator down to the lobby where Marcus was waiting. Except tonight, Adrian waved him off. "I'm taking the subway." Marcus raised an eyebrow but said nothing. 6 years of driving Adrian had apparently taught him when to keep his opinions to himself. The rain had turned to sleet by the time Adrian reached the station, and the platform was crowded with miserable commuters trying to get home. He stood there dripping, watching rats scurry along the tracks, and wondered what the hell he was doing. He could have had Marcus drive him to Queens in comfort, could have shown up dry and warm instead of looking like he'd swum there. But Clara had said to take the subway, and for reasons Adrian didn't want to examine too closely, he found himself following her instructions even when they made no practical sense. The train was packed. Adrian wedged himself between a woman with approximately 17 shopping bags and a guy who smelled like he'd bathed in cologne. Across from him, a mother was trying to wrangle 2 kids who clearly didn't want to be wrangled. One of them was crying about something, the sound piercing even over the train noise. The mother looked exhausted. Not just tired, exhausted in that way that suggested she'd been running on empty for months and had forgotten what full felt like. She caught Adrian staring and gave him an apologetic smile. "Sorry, long day." "Don't apologize," Adrian heard himself say. "You're doing great." She looked surprised, then grateful, then went back to negotiating with her kids about something involving goldfish crackers and screen time. Adrian watched them and thought about Sophie, about all the times he'd been that exhausted parent in public, about how nobody ever told you that you were doing great even when you desperately needed to hear it. He pulled out his phone and texted Sophie's nanny, "Tell Sophie I love her, and that we're still on for ice cream this weekend." Jennifer's reply came fast. "Will do. She's already asleep, but I'll tell her in the morning. She drew you another picture today." Adrian smiled despite himself. More stick figures, probably. More proof that his 6-year-old daughter saw the world in simpler terms than he could anymore. The train lurched into Astoria, and Adrian got off with half the car. Clara's directions led him through streets he didn't recognize to a small restaurant tucked between a laundromat and a grocery store. The sign said basil and thyme in hand-painted letters, and through the window he could see maybe a dozen tables, all full. Inside smelled incredible, garlic and something roasting and fresh bread. A hostess who couldn't have been older than 20 looked up from her podium. "Do you have a reservation?" "Keller, I'm meeting Rachel?" "Oh, yes, she said you'd be coming. She's still in the kitchen, but she'll be out in a minute. Can I get you seated?" The table was near the back, small and intimate in a way that made Adrian immediately aware of how exposed he felt. This wasn't the kind of restaurant where you could hide behind menus and formality. This was the kind of place where the chef came out to talk to tables, and everyone could hear everyone else's conversations. He was reading the menu, all seasonal, all local, the kind of thoughtful food that took actual skill, when a woman in chef's whites emerged from the kitchen. Rachel was maybe 35, with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, and the kind of confident stride that came from running your own kitchen. She spotted Adrian and headed over, wiping her hands on a towel. "You must be Adrian. I'm Rachel." She slid into the seat across from him without ceremony. "Fair warning, I only have about 40 minutes before dinner service gets crazy, so we're doing the speed dating version of this." "Works for me." "Good." "Clara said you're," how did she put it, "chronically overworked and emotionally constipated, but trying." Rachel grinned. "I like her. She doesn't sugarcoat things." "Apparently not." Adrian set down the menu. "She didn't tell me much about you except that you run this place." "That's pretty much the story. Grew up in Queens, worked in restaurants since I was 16, saved every penny for 10 years to open this place 3 years ago." Rachel flagged down a waiter. "We're doing the tasting menu. Don't argue, it's better that way." Adrian normally hated when people ordered for him, but something about Rachel's absolute certainty made it work. The waiter nodded and disappeared. "So," Rachel leaned back in her chair, "Clara says you need to get married for business reasons." "That's a new one." "It's complicated." "Everything's complicated if you make it complicated. What's the actual situation?" There was something about Rachel's directness that made bullshitting impossible. So Adrian told her about the merger, the deadline, his father's expectations, the whole mess. She listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding. When he finished, she let out a low whistle. "That's a lot of pressure." "Yeah." "And you thought speed dating through Clara's client list would solve it?" "I thought it was worth a try." "Honest, I like that."
The first course arrived, something with roasted beets and goat cheese that looked like art on a plate. Rachel took a bite, made an approving face. Okay, David nailed it tonight. Anyway, my turn. I'm 36, never married, no kids. I work about 90 hours a week, and I'm not interested in changing that. I love what I do more than I'll probably ever love a person, which makes me terrible relationship material. Then why are you here? Because Clara asked, and she helped my sister find her husband, so I owe her. Also because I was curious what kind of guy shows up to a matchmaker asking for a business marriage. She studied him across the table. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone more arrogant, more entitled. You just seem tired. She said it without judgment, just observation. When's the last time you actually wanted to be on a date instead of feeling like you should be on a date? The question hit harder than it should have. Adrian thought back through the last 4 dates, through years of obligatory +1s and networking dinners disguised as social events, trying to find a moment where he'd actually wanted to be there. I don't remember, he admitted. Yeah, that's what I figured. Rachel finished her beats. Look, you seem like a decent guy in a shitty situation, but here's the thing. I can't be what you need. I'm married to this restaurant. I barely have time to sleep, much less maintain a relationship with someone who's got his own high-pressure career and a kid. We'd be a disaster. I appreciate the honesty. But, she held up a hand, I think you're asking the wrong question. Which is? You're asking, who can I marry to solve this problem? You should be asking, do I even want to solve it this way? Rachel leaned forward. 30,000 jobs is a lot of responsibility. I get it, but it's not your whole life. It's not even your whole identity. You're also a dad, right? Yeah. And what's more important, saving the company or being present for your daughter while she's actually young enough to need you? The second course arrived, some kind of pasta that smelled like heaven. Rachel took a bite, nodded approval. I'm not saying blow up the merger. I'm saying maybe there's a middle ground you're not seeing because you're too close to it. Adrian wanted to argue, to explain all the reasons why there was no middle ground, why it had to be all or nothing. But the words stuck in his throat because somewhere deep down, he knew Rachel was right. They talked for the rest of the dinner, about the restaurant business, about Sophie's dinosaur obsession, about the million small decisions that added up to a life. Rachel was easy to talk to, funny and sharp and completely unimpressed by anything Adrian might have used to try to impress her. When she had to get back to the kitchen, she stood and offered her hand. You're going to figure this out, she said. Maybe not the way you planned, but you'll figure it out. And hey, when you do, bring your daughter here. I make a mac and cheese that'll blow her mind. I'll do that. Good luck, Adrian. I mean it. She squeezed his hand once, then disappeared back into the kitchen, leaving Adrian alone with the check and a head full of thoughts he didn't know what to do with. The subway ride back was quieter, less crowded. Adrian found a seat and pulled out his phone, scrolling through the usual flood of emails and messages. One from his father, marked urgent. One from Morrison, marked urgent. Several from investors, all marked urgent. Everything was always urgent. He ignored all of them and opened his messages with Clara instead. Rachel was great, he typed. Also brutally honest. The reply came fast. That's why I set you up with her. You need brutal honesty. Apparently I need a lot of things. Yeah, how are you holding up? Adrian stared at the question. When was the last time someone had asked him that and actually wanted to know the answer? He started typing several responses, deleted them all, finally settled on, I don't know. Tired. Confused. 10 days to figure out my entire life. You don't have to figure out your entire life. Just the next step. What if I don't know what the next step is? Then you take any step and adjust from there. That's how everyone does it, Adrian. We're all just making it up as we go. He wanted to ask her more, about how she managed to sound so certain about uncertainty, about whether she ever felt this lost, about why she kept helping him when he was clearly a disaster. But before he could type anything, another message came through. Thursday night, 7 p.m., Prospect Park, dress warm, candidate number 6. Prospect Park? That's not a restaurant. Nope. See you Thursday. Adrian stared at his phone, but Clara had already gone quiet. Thursday in Prospect Park with candidate number 6, whoever that was. He had no idea what Clara was planning, which seemed to be her standard operating procedure. The train pulled into his stop,
and Adrian emerged into the cold night air. He was halfway to the penthouse when his phone rang. His father. He let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again and again. On the fourth call, Adrian answered.
"What, Dad? Where the hell have you been? I've been calling for hours." Charles sounded angry, which wasn't unusual, but there was something else underneath it. Something that might have been worry if his father was capable of that. "I was at dinner." "With who?" "None of your business."
Everything about this merger is my business. Everything about this family is my business. A pause. Morrison says you're still refusing to coordinate with PR. The gala is 10 days away, Adrian. 10 days. If you don't have a plan, I have a plan. Then share it with me. Let me help you. For once in your stubborn life, let me...
"I don't need your help." The words came out harder than Adrian intended. "I need you to trust that I can handle this." Trust. His father's laugh was bitter. "You want me to trust you when you won't even tell me what you're doing? When you're running around the city having mysterious dinners and refusing to return calls? When the entire future of this company is riding on you making the right choice? The right choice according to who? According to anyone with sense. According to the investors who expect stability. According to the 30,000 people whose jobs depend on this merger going through." Charles's voice rose. "This isn't about you, Adrian. It's bigger than you. And if you can't see that, I see it every day. I see it in every decision I make, every meeting I sit through, every night I come home too exhausted to be a decent father to my daughter." Adrian stopped walking, standing in the middle of the sidewalk while people flowed around him. "What I don't see is how sacrificing everything that makes life worth living is supposed to make me better at saving the company." Silence on the other end. Then, "What are you talking about?"
I'm talking about the fact that I've spent 3 years building this empire you're so worried about, and I can't remember the last time I was actually happy. I'm talking about how I barely know my own daughter because I'm always working. I'm talking about how everyone keeps telling me what I should do, and nobody asks me what I want. What you want doesn't matter when thousands of people are depending on you. And there it was. The thing his father had been teaching him his whole life. The core belief that had shaped every choice Adrian had made since he was old enough to understand what responsibility meant. What you want doesn't matter. "Maybe that's the problem," Adrian said quietly. "What?" "Maybe I've been making decisions based on what everyone else needs for so long that I forgot I'm allowed to want things too." He started walking again, faster now. "I'll make the announcement at the gala. I gave you my word and I'll keep it, but the rest of it, who I choose, how I handle it, what happens after, that's mine, not yours." "Adrian," he hung up. His hands were shaking. He stood there in front of his building, looking up at the penthouse 52 floors above, and felt the weight of every choice he'd made that had led him here. Every time he'd said yes when he meant no. Every time he'd put the company first and everything else second. Every time he'd let his father's voice drown out his own. The doorman opened the door with his usual professional smile. "Evening, Mr. Keller?" "Evening, James." The elevator ride up felt longer than usual. Adrian watched the numbers climb and thought about Rachel's question. What's more important, the company or being present for Sophie? He knew what his father would say, knew what the investors would say, knew what Morrison and the attorneys and everyone with a stake in the merger would say. But for the first time in a long time, Adrian let himself ask what he would say. The penthouse was quiet when he walked in. Jennifer was reading on the couch, some paperback romance that she quickly closed when she saw him. "You're home early. Everything okay?" "Yeah, thanks for staying late." He hung up his coat. "How was Sophie?" "Good. Energetic. We played about 17 rounds of some game she made up involving her stuffed animals having a talent show." Jennifer smiled. She insisted the bear should win, but the elephant clearly had better stage presence. Adrian felt something loosen in his chest. "Sounds about right." "She's asleep now. Went down about half an hour ago." Jennifer gathered her things. "She did ask when you're going to teach her to ride a bike. Apparently some kid at school just learned." "I'll add it to the list." After Jennifer left, Adrian stood in the hallway for a long moment, just breathing. Then he walked to Sophie's room and pushed open the door as quietly as he could. She was sprawled across her bed in that boneless way kids slept, one arm flung out, clutching the worn teddy bear that had been Elizabeth's. Her nightlight cast soft shadows across the walls. stars and moons that she'd picked out herself. Adrian sat down carefully on the edge of the bed, watching her breathe. She had Elizabeth's nose, his mother's chin, some combination of genetics that had produced this small, perfect person who trusted him completely, despite all the ways he kept failing her.
"I'm trying, sweetheart," he whispered. "I don't know if I'm doing it right, but I'm trying." Sophie stirred, blinking up at him with sleepy eyes. "Daddy, I'm here. Go back to sleep." "Did you have a good meeting?" "It wasn't a meeting. It was dinner with someone new." "Was she nice?" "Yeah, very nice." Sophie yawned. "Are you going to marry her?" The question shouldn't have surprised him. 6-year-olds asked everything, but it still caught him off guard. "I don't think so, baby." "Why?" "Jennifer says you need to find someone so you won't be lonely." She said it matter-of-factly, like she was reporting the weather. "Are you lonely?" Adrian's throat tightened. "Sometimes, but I have you, so I'm not that lonely." "You could get a dog. Dogs help with lonely." "I'll keep that in mind." He kissed her forehead. "Go back to sleep. I love you." "Love you too, Daddy." She was already drifting off again, the conversation forgotten. Adrian sat there for a few more minutes, watching her sleep, trying to imagine what Elizabeth would say about all of this. She'd probably laugh at him for overthinking everything, tell him to trust his gut, remind him that the best decisions were usually the simplest ones. But Elizabeth wasn't here, and Adrian was alone with choices that felt anything but simple. He went to his own room, poured himself the usual scotch, and stood at the window looking out at Manhattan. Somewhere in this city, Clara was probably closing up her office or heading home to whatever small apartment she lived in. Somewhere, Rachel was finishing dinner service. Somewhere, his father was probably still seething about their phone call. And somewhere there was a version of Adrian's life where he made different choices, took different risks, let himself want things that weren't about responsibility or duty or what everyone else needed. He just had no idea how to get there from here. His phone buzzed with a reminder. Thursday, 7 p.m., Prospect Park, 2 days away. 2 more chances after that to find whatever it was he was supposed to be finding. The scotch burned going down, but Adrian barely tasted it. He was too busy thinking about what Rachel had said, about middle grounds he couldn't see, about questions he was afraid to ask, and about Clara, who kept pushing him toward answers he wasn't sure he wanted. Thursday arrived wrapped in cold so sharp it hurt to breathe. Adrian spent the morning in meetings that blurred together, everyone talking about contingency plans and backup options and what would happen if the merger fell through. He nodded in the right places, signed what needed signing, and felt completely disconnected from all of it. At lunch, Morrison cornered him again. "Your father is talking about flying to Hong Kong himself to smooth things over with the Lee family." "Let him. Adrian, if he goes over there without a clear message about your engagement, then he'll figure it out. He's good at that." Adrian grabbed his coat. "I have somewhere to be. It's 2 in the afternoon." "Observant as always, Morrison." He left before the conversation could continue, taking the elevator down and walking out into the December cold. He had 5 hours before he was supposed to meet candidate number 6 in Prospect Park, and he had no idea what to do with them. His feet carried him toward the village almost without conscious thought. He found himself standing in front of Books and Brew, staring at the hand-painted sign, before he really registered where he'd gone. Marco spotted him through the window and waved. Adrian pushed open the door. "Clara's friend," Marco grinned. "She said you'd be back. Your book's behind the counter." Adrian had forgotten about the book. He took it from Marco, feeling the weight of it in his hands. That story about grief and rebuilding that had felt too close to read, but impossible to put down. "Coffee?" Marco was already reaching for a cup. "Yeah, thanks." He settled into the same armchair he'd sat in on Saturday, opened the book, and picked up where he'd left off. The coffee shop filled and emptied around him, afternoon light shifting through the windows, the soundtrack of other people's conversations washing over him. The book's protagonist was trying to decide whether to sell his late wife's art studio or keep it as a shrine. Adrian read the passage 3 times, seeing too much of himself in the paralysis, the inability to move forward or back. "You look like you're having an existential crisis." The voice startled him. Adrian looked up to find Clara standing there holding 2 coffees and wearing an expression that was half amused, half concerned. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "Marco texted me, said you showed up looking lost."
She handed him one of the coffees. I was in the neighborhood. You were not in the neighborhood. Fine. I was at my office 12 blocks away and I walked here. Same difference. Clara sat down across from him. Aren't you supposed to be at work? Probably. But instead, you're here, reading a book about grief in the middle of a Thursday afternoon. She took a sip of her coffee. Want to talk about it? Not particularly. Okay. She pulled out her own book, a different one than last time, and started reading. They sat like that for a while, reading in comfortable silence while the coffee shop hummed around them. Adrian kept glancing up, watching Clara read, the way she'd occasionally smile at something or make a small noise of disapproval. She looked completely at ease, like sitting in a coffee shop on a Thursday afternoon was exactly where she was supposed to be. Can I ask you something? Adrian said finally. Clara looked up. Sure. Why are you really helping me? And don't say it's just business, because you could have turned me away that first night. She considered the question, marking her place in the book. Honestly? Because you were the first person who walked into my office in months who actually seemed to want something real. Everyone else wants the fairy tale, the perfect match who checks all their boxes and makes all their friends jealous. You just wanted to feel less alone. I never said that. You didn't have to. It was written all over your face. She set the book aside. And because my mom built that business on the idea that everyone deserves a chance at real connection, even people who think they're too broken or too busy or too whatever to find it, I couldn't turn you away without betraying what she believed in. Your mom sounds like she was pretty great. She was. She was also stubborn and interfering and absolutely convinced she knew what was best for everyone. Clara smiled. I miss her every day. How long has it been? 2 years. Cancer. By the time they found it, there was nothing they could do. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. The business almost died with her. I had no idea how to run it, but I couldn't let it go. It was the last piece of her I had left. Adrian understood that better than he could say. Is it working? The business, I mean. Barely. I'm not my mother. I don't have her instincts, her natural ability to see what people need. I'm just trying to honor what she built without completely screwing it up. Clara met his eyes. Kind of like you and the company, I guess. Both of us trying to live up to impossible standards while pretending we have it all figured out. The parallel hit home. I don't pretend I have it figured out. Yeah, you do. That whole controlled CEO thing you've got going, that's pretending. The real you is the guy who showed up at my office desperate and honest. The guy who takes his daughter to pottery painting and makes her pancakes for dinner. The guy sitting here reading about grief instead of working on his merger. All those versions of me are failing at something. Or maybe they're all trying to figure out what actually matters. Clara checked her phone. It's almost 6. You should probably head to the park. Prospect Park is a hike from here. Who is she? Candidate number 6. Her name is Lauren. She's a social worker, works with kids in the foster system. Clara stood up, gathering her things. She's kind and patient and has seen enough hard things that she won't judge you for yours. I think you'll like her. And after Lauren? Clara paused and something flickered across her face too fast for Adrian to read. After Lauren, there's one more, number 7. You said she was complicated. She is. Are you going to tell me anything else about her? Not yet. Clara pulled on her coat. Focus on Lauren tonight. Be present. Actually try to see her instead of seeing a solution to your problem. You keep saying that. Because you keep not doing it. But she smiled. Good luck, Adrian. I mean it. She left, and Adrian sat there with his book and his coffee and the growing realization that something had shifted. He wasn't sure when or how, but somewhere between the first date with Isabel and sitting in this coffee shop reading about other people's grief, the question had changed. It wasn't, who can I marry to save the merger anymore? It was, what do I actually want my life to look like? And Adrian had no idea how to answer that. But he was starting to suspect that maybe Clara did. Prospect Park at 7 in December was a special kind of cold that made Adrian question every decision that had led him there. He stood near the entrance Clara had texted him, watching his breath fog in the air, wondering if candidate number 6 had gotten lost or come to her senses and stayed home. Then he saw her. A woman in her late 20s, bundled in layers, carrying 2 thermoses and waving when she spotted him. Adrian, I'm Lauren. She handed him one of the thermoses. Hot chocolate. Clara said you'd probably show up underdressed for the weather. She was right. Adrian's coat was expensive, but designed more for looking good than actual warmth. Thanks. I wasn't expecting an outdoor date. Yeah, Clara has a thing about breaking patterns. She thought we should try something different. Lauren started walking down a path, and Adrian fell into step beside her. I work with kids who've been through terrible things. Sometimes the best conversations happen when you're moving instead of sitting across a table staring at each other. That makes sense. Does it? Or are you just being polite? She smiled, and it transformed her whole face. Clara warned me you're a compulsive people pleaser under all the CEO armor. She said that? She said a lot of things, most of them contradictory. You're closed off but desperate for connection. Workaholic but trying to change. Brilliant businessman but emotionally stunted. Lauren took a sip from her thermos. I told her that sounded like half the people I work with, just with more money. Adrian found himself almost laughing. She really said, emotionally stunted? Her exact words. But she also said you were genuinely trying, which is more than most people do. They walked in silence for a moment, their footsteps crunching on the frozen path. So, Clara tells me you need a wife by the end of the month. That's romantic. It's a disaster, is what it is. Maybe, or maybe it's forcing you to actually figure out what you want instead of just drifting through life on autopilot. Lauren stopped at a bench, brushed off the snow, and sat down. Can I be really direct with you? Everyone else has been. Good. So here's the thing. I can't be your solution. I'm not interested in being anyone's emergency wife, no matter how nice they are or how much they need saving. She held up a hand before Adrian could respond. But I said yes to this date because Clara thought we should meet. And after hearing about you, I was curious. Curious about what? About what kind of person gets so tangled up in responsibility that they forget they're allowed to want things for themselves. She turned to look at him. So tell me something. If you didn't have the merger hanging over your head, if you didn't have 30,000 employees depending on you, if it was just you and your daughter and no obligations, what would you want? The question landed like a punch. Adrian opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. I don't know. Yeah, I figured. Lauren pulled her knees up, wrapping her arms around them. I see this with the kids I work with. They get so used to surviving, to doing what they have to do, that they forget how to imagine what they might want to do. You've got that same look. I'm a 32-year-old billionaire. It's not exactly the same. Trauma is trauma. Doesn't matter if it comes from foster care or from building an empire while grieving your wife. You're still someone who's forgotten how to want things. She said it gently, without judgment. When's the last time you did something just because it made you happy? Adrian tried to remember. The pottery painting with Sophie? Reading in the bookstore. Before that, nothing came to mind. Just years of meetings and decisions and responsibilities stacking up like bricks until he couldn't see over the wall anymore. That long, huh? Lauren stood up, brushing snow off her jeans. Come on, walk with me. They walked deeper into the park, passing the occasional jogger or dog walker, people living their normal Thursday evening lives. Lauren talked about her work, about the kids she helped, about a 13-year-old who'd just been placed with a family that actually seemed to get her. That's the thing nobody tells you about this job, she said. Most of the time, you can't fix anything. You just show up and witness and hope that being seen by someone who cares makes a difference. She glanced at Adrian, kind of like what Clara's doing with you, actually. Clara's trying to find me a wife. No, she's trying to help you figure out what you actually need. The wife thing is just the excuse. Lauren stopped walking, turning to face him. Can I tell you what I see when I look at you? I have a feeling you're going to anyway. I see someone who's so scared of making the wrong choice that he's forgotten how to make any choice at all. You're letting everyone else decide what you should do. Your father, the investors, the Lee family, even Clara to some extent. And you're going along with it because it's easier than figuring out what you want. That's not... Adrian stopped himself because it was true. Every word of it. I'm not judging you. I get it. Making real choices is terrifying, especially when people are depending on you. Lauren started walking again, slower this time. But here's what I've learned from watching kids in impossible situations. The only way out is through. You can't solve this by finding the perfect wife who checks all the boxes. You have to actually decide what kind of life you want to build. And if I don't know, then you start small. What made you happy today?
What made you feel like yourself instead of CEO Adrian Keller? She waited, and when Adrian didn't answer immediately, she prompted, "Come on, one thing." "I went to a bookstore," he said finally. "I sat and read for a while. It felt good." "Okay, what else?" "I made pancakes with my daughter last weekend. She got eggshells in the batter and we laughed about it." "Keep going."
"There's this matchmaker who keeps calling me out on my crap, and I keep showing up to get called out on it because it feels more real than anything else in my life." The words came out before Adrian could stop them. Lauren's smile was knowing. The matchmaker being Clara. Obviously. And you realize that's significant, right? That the realest thing in your life right now is someone who sees through all your defenses. Adrian didn't answer because he didn't know how. Lauren studied his face for a long moment, then nodded like she'd confirmed something. "You know what I think? I think you already know what you want. You're just terrified to admit it because it doesn't fit the plan." She checked her phone. "I should get going. Early shift tomorrow." "Wait, that's it?" "That's it. I told you I can't be your solution, but maybe I helped you see the solution you've been avoiding." Lauren pulled her coat tighter. "Clara's setting you up with one more person, right? Number 7? Yeah, she won't tell me who it is. Then I'd say you have about 3 days to figure out if you're going to keep playing it safe or actually take a risk." She stuck out her hand. "It was nice meeting you, Adrian. I hope you figure it out." They shook hands, and Lauren walked away into the December darkness, leaving Adrian standing alone in Prospect Park with a thermos of lukewarm hot chocolate and a head full of thoughts he didn't want to examine. He pulled out his phone and stared at Clara's contact for a long time before typing. Lauren was right about everything, wasn't she? The response came fast. "Usually is. She has a gift for seeing what people need to hear." "Is that why you set us up? To tell me I'm avoiding what I really want?" "I set you up because I thought you'd have a good conversation. What you do with it is up to you." Adrian started typing several responses, deleted them all, finally settled on, "Who's number 7, Clara?" The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "You'll find out soon, trust me. I do trust you. That's the problem." This time the response took longer. When it came, it was just, "Sunday, 2 p.m., meet me at my office. Don't be late." Adrian stared at the message. Sunday was 3 days away. 3 days before the final date. 4 days before the gala where he was supposed to announce an engagement he didn't have to a woman he hadn't met yet. The smart move would be to call his father, pick someone from that approved list, and handle this like the business transaction it was supposed to be. The safe move would be to stop this experiment and go back to what he knew. But standing there in the cold park, Adrian realized he didn't want to make the smart move anymore. He wanted to see what happened on Sunday. The next 3 days passed in a blur of increasingly frantic meetings. The merger was hitting unexpected snags. Legal language that needed revising, contingency clauses the Lee family wanted added, Morrison looking more stressed every time Adrian saw him. His father called twice a day, each conversation more tense than the last. Friday morning, Charles showed up at Adrian's office unannounced. "We need to talk," his father said, closing the door behind him. "I'm in a meeting in 10 minutes. Cancel it." Charles sat down without being invited, looking older than Adrian remembered. "The Lee family is getting nervous. They're hearing rumors that you don't have anyone lined up for the announcement." "Where would they hear that?" "Does it matter? The point is they're spooked. If you don't give me something concrete, a name, a background, something I can use to reassure them, they're going to pull out before we even get to the gala." Adrian leaned back in his chair. "And if I told you I'm handling it?" "I'd say I don't believe you." Charles's voice was hard. "You've been acting erratically for weeks. Mysterious absences, refusing to communicate, turning down perfectly suitable candidates. I'm starting to think you want this merger to fail." "That's ridiculous." "Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're sabotaging everything we've built out of some misguided idea that you deserve to find love or whatever nonsense you've convinced yourself of." The words hit like a slap. Misguided nonsense, that's what you think wanting a real relationship is? I think it's a luxury you can't afford right now. I think 30,000 jobs matter more than your feelings. Charles stood up, pacing to the window. "Your mother understood that. She married me because it made sense for both families, and we built something good together. Not perfect, not passionate, but stable. Reliable. That's what matters." "Mom was miserable," Adrian said quietly. His father spun around. "What?" "She was miserable. I remember. All those years before she got sick, she'd sit in the garden alone for hours. She'd forget to eat dinner. She'd look at you like she was looking at a stranger. Adrian met his father's eyes. You think she was happy in that stable, reliable marriage? She was dying inside long before the cancer killed her. Charles's face went white. You don't know what you're talking about. I was 19, Dad. Not blind. I saw what a loveless marriage looked like, and I watched it destroy her little by little. Adrian stood up. I won't do that to someone else. I won't do it to myself, not even to save the company. Then you're a fool. Maybe. But at least I'll be a fool who actually tried to find something real. His father stared at him for a long moment, something shifting in his expression that Adrian couldn't read. Then Charles walked to the door, paused with his hand on the handle. The gala is Monday night. If you don't make an announcement, the merger dies. And when 30,000 people lose their jobs because you wanted to play romantic hero, that's on you. He opened the door. I hope whoever she is, she's worth it. Then he was gone, leaving Adrian alone in his office with the weight of everything he'd just said pressing down on him. His phone buzzed, a text from Sophie's school. Parent-teacher conference Monday at 4 p.m. Please confirm. Monday. The day of the gala. The day everything was supposed to come together or fall apart. Adrian texted back, I'll be there. Then he pulled up his email and started typing a message to Morrison. I need you to prepare contingency plans for if the merger falls through. Severance packages, placement assistance, everything we can do to help the employees. I want real plans, not just promises. Morrison's response came within minutes. Are you saying the merger is off? I'm saying I need to be prepared for all outcomes. Can you do it or not? I'll have something by Monday morning. Adrian set down his phone and looked around his office. The expensive furniture, the view of Manhattan, all the trappings of success that suddenly felt hollow. He thought about his mother sitting alone in the garden, about Elizabeth, who'd loved him enough to make their tiny apartment feel like home, about Sophie, who just wanted her father to be present, about Clara, who kept pushing him toward answers he was terrified to accept. Saturday morning, Sophie woke him up at 6 by jumping on his bed. It's ice cream day, she announced, like this was a national holiday. It's 6 in the morning. You promised. You said Sunday, but I checked your calendar and you have a meeting Sunday, so we should do it today. She bounced with each word, nearly kneeing him in the stomach. Adrian caught her mid-bounce. How did you check my calendar? Jennifer showed me. She said I should always know when you're busy so I don't get disappointed. Sophie's face fell slightly. Are you too busy for ice cream? Every instinct told Adrian to check his phone, to see what urgent messages had piled up overnight, to find a reason why he needed to work today. But looking at Sophie's hopeful face, he made a different choice. I'm never too busy for ice cream with you. He sat up. Get dressed. We're making this a whole day thing. A whole day? Ice cream, lunch, whatever you want. It's Saturday and you're more important than work. Sophie hugged him so hard it hurt. Really? Really? They spent the day doing exactly what Sophie wanted. Ice cream for breakfast because why not? Then the Natural History Museum where she made him look at every single dinosaur exhibit and read every single plaque. Lunch at a diner where she ordered chocolate chip pancakes even though it was 2 in the afternoon. A walk through Central Park where she collected leaves and told him elaborate stories about what kind of magic each one contained. Adrian's phone buzzed constantly in his pocket. He ignored every single notification. Daddy, you're not looking at your phone, Sophie observed as they sat on a bench watching dogs play in the dog park. That's because I'm looking at you. But what if it's important? You're more important. He pulled her close. Hey, can I tell you something? Okay. I know I've been working too much. I know I haven't been around as much as I should be, and I'm sorry about that. Sophie was quiet for a moment, watching a golden retriever chase a tennis ball. Jennifer says you work hard because you love me, because you want to make sure we have money and stuff. Jennifer talks a lot. Are you going to fire her? No, baby, I'm not going to fire her. Adrian kissed the top of Sophie's head. But she's wrong about something. I don't work hard because I love you. I work hard because I'm scared, and that's not fair to you. Scared of what? How did you explain existential dread to a 6-year-old? Scared of failing, scared of letting people down, scared of a lot of things that probably don't matter as much as I think they do. Sophie considered this with the seriousness only children could bring to philosophical discussions.
Miss Peterson says being scared is okay. She says the brave thing is doing stuff even when you're scared. Miss Peterson sounds smart. She is. She gave me a gold star for my story about the magic dinosaurs. Sophie leaned against him. Are you going to be brave, Daddy? Adrian looked at his daughter, at this small person who trusted him completely despite all his failures, and felt something shift inside him. Yeah, sweetheart. I'm going to try.
They stayed in the park until the sun started setting and Sophie's energy finally flagged. On the walk home, she held his hand and chattered about everything and nothing, and Adrian felt more present than he had in months. That night, after Sophie was asleep, he sat down and wrote an email he'd been avoiding for 3 years. Dear Elizabeth, I know you're not here to read this, but I need to say it anyway. I've been stuck for 3 years. Stuck in grief. Stuck in responsibility. Stuck in this idea that moving forward meant betraying you. And I've built my entire life around that stuckness, convinced myself it was noble or necessary or whatever justification I needed. But it's not noble. It's just scared. I met someone. She's not you. Nobody could be you. But she sees me in a way I haven't been seen since you died. She calls me out and pushes me and makes me want to be better instead of just successful. And I'm terrified. Because wanting something real means risking loss again. It means admitting that life keeps going even when we want it to stop. It means choosing something for myself instead of hiding behind responsibility. I think you'd tell me to stop being an idiot. You were always better at that than I was, seeing what mattered, letting go of what didn't. I wish you were here to tell me what to do. But you're not. So I have to figure this out on my own. I love you. I'll always love you. But I think it's time to stop using that love as an excuse to stay stuck. I hope that's okay. Adrian. He didn't send it anywhere because there was nowhere to send it, but writing it felt like something loosening in his chest, some knot he'd been carrying finally starting to untangle. Sunday morning arrived cold and clear. Adrian stood in front of his closet trying to figure out what you wore to meet the 7th candidate when you had no idea who she was or what to expect. He settled on jeans and a sweater, then changed into a button-down, then changed back to the sweater. You look nervous, Sophie said from the doorway, holding her stuffed elephant. I'm meeting someone important today. The person you're going to marry? I don't know yet. He crouched down to her level. But maybe. We'll see. I hope she's nice, and I hope she likes dinosaurs. Sophie hugged the elephant. And I hope you're happy, Daddy. You look sad a lot. Adrian pulled her into a hug, this small person who saw more than he gave her credit for. I'm working on the happy part. I promise. The subway to Clara's office felt longer than usual. Adrian checked his phone compulsively, reading and rereading Clara's message. 2 p.m. Don't be late. And Adrian? Be honest. Not CEO honest, actually honest. He arrived at the brownstone at 1:55. The lights were on inside, and through the window he could see Clara moving around, arranging papers, looking nervous in a way he'd never seen her before. Adrian pushed open the door. Clara spun around, and her expression was something between anxious and determined. You're early. You said don't be late. I said 2 o'clock. It's 1:57. Close enough. She twisted her hands together, then seemed to realize she was doing it and forced them to her sides. Okay. So, before we do this, I need to tell you something. Okay? This whole thing, the 7 dates, it wasn't just about finding you a wife. It was about helping you figure out what you actually want, what matters to you, who you are when you're not being the billionaire CEO. Clara took a breath. And I think you've figured that out. I think you know what you want now. Clara, what's going on? I'm getting to it. Let me finish. She started pacing, a nervous energy Adrian had never seen from her. Each person I set you up with showed you something different. Isabel showed you that perfect on paper doesn't mean anything if there's no connection. Meredith showed you that intellect alone isn't enough. Victoria showed you that ambition without compatibility is just 2 people passing in the night. Amanda showed you that you were approaching this all wrong. Rachel showed you to ask different questions. Lauren showed you that you already know the answer. The answer to what? To what you want. Who you want. Clara stopped pacing, meeting his eyes. Candidate number 7 isn't some stranger I found in my files, Adrian. It's not someone new you need to get to know. Understanding hit like ice water. Clara, it's me. I'm number 7. The words tumbled out fast, like she needed to say them before she lost her nerve. And I know that's crazy because I'm the matchmaker, not the match. I'm the one who's supposed to stay objective and professional and help you find someone else. But somewhere between that first night when you walked into my office, desperate and honest, and watching you actually try to change, and sitting in that bookstore reading with you, I stopped being objective. Adrian couldn't breathe, couldn't move, could only stand there staring at Clara as everything he'd been avoiding for weeks suddenly became impossible to ignore. I like you, Clara continued, the words coming faster now. I like that you make your daughter pancakes and take the subway even though you could have a driver. I like that you actually read the book Marco saved for you. I like that you're trying so hard to be better even when you don't know how. I like that underneath all the CEO armor, you're just a scared person trying to do the right thing. Clara. And I know this is completely unprofessional. I know I'm supposed to be helping you find someone suitable, someone who fits your world, someone your father would approve of. I know I'm nobody, just a broke matchmaker running her dead mother's failing business out of a brownstone that should probably be condemned. Her voice cracked slightly. But I also know that every time I set you up with someone else, I was hoping it wouldn't work out. And that's terrible, and I'm sorry, but it's true. The silence that fell between them was deafening. Adrian could hear his own heartbeat, could hear cars passing outside, could hear everything except the right words to say. Say something, Clara whispered. Please. Even if it's that I'm insane and this was completely inappropriate and you want your money back. You didn't charge me anything. Then say you want me to find you someone else. Say this is crazy and we should forget I ever said anything. Say something other than just staring at me like I've grown a second head. Adrian took a step closer, then another. Clara watched him with wide eyes, looking terrified and hopeful, and so different from the confident matchmaker who'd told him she didn't do fake marriages. I can't believe you set this whole thing up, he said finally. I didn't set it up. I didn't plan this. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being your matchmaker and started being someone who cares about you. Clara's hands were shaking, and I thought maybe if you met all these other people and none of them felt right, you might realize that the person you've been looking for was here the whole time. Clara, but if I'm wrong, if I completely misread everything, if you actually want me to set you up with someone else for real, I will. I'll find you someone perfect who fits your world, and I'll help you save your merger, and I'll never mention this again. She was talking too fast, the words running together. I just needed you to know, before the gala, before you make some decision based on what everyone else wants, I needed you to know that there's another option. That you don't have to settle for convenient or suitable or whatever your father thinks is appropriate. That you could, if you wanted, choose something real. Adrian reached out and took her hand, cutting off the flood of words. Clara froze. Stop talking for a second, he said softly. Okay? You're right. About everything. He laced his fingers through hers. Every date I went on, I was comparing them to you. Every conversation, I was wishing I was talking to you instead. Every time my phone buzzed, I hoped it was you texting me about the next candidate because it meant I'd get to see you again. Adrian, my turn. Let me finish. He squeezed her hand. You scare the hell out of me, Clara, because you see through every defense I've spent years building. You don't care about the money or the company or any of the things that usually matter to people. You just see me, the scared, broken version of me that I try so hard to hide. And you stick around anyway. You're not broken. I am. But maybe broken is okay if you've got the right person helping you put the pieces back together. Adrian pulled her closer. I spent 3 years convinced that moving forward meant betraying Elizabeth, that wanting something for myself was selfish, that I didn't deserve to be happy because happiness felt like forgetting her. You can be happy and still honor her memory, Clara said quietly. They're not mutually exclusive. I'm starting to figure that out, thanks to you. He touched her face and Clara leaned into his hand. But here's the thing, choosing you means choosing something that doesn't solve my problems. You can't save the merger. My father will hate you. The investors will probably revolt. The Lee family will walk away. Everything I've been trying to protect will probably collapse. I know. And you're still here? Still offering yourself as candidate number 7? I'm still here. Why? Clara smiled, and it was sad and hopeful at the same time. Because I think you need someone who cares about you more than they care about your company. And because I think Sophie deserves a father who's actually present instead of just performing presence. And because... She stopped, bit her lip. Because what? Because I think I'm falling in love with you, and that's terrifying, but also the most honest thing I've felt in 2 years of running this business and pretending I have everything figured out. Adrian kissed her, pulled her close and kissed her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking for 3 years without knowing it. Clara made a small surprised sound, then kissed him back, her hands fisting in his sweater. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Clara looked dazed. So, she said, does this mean you're choosing candidate number 7? This means I'm choosing you. Not because you can save the merger or because you fit some profile of what I'm supposed to want, just because I want you. Even though it means losing everything else? I don't know if I'm losing everything. Maybe I'm finally gaining what actually matters. He rested his forehead against hers. But I'm scared, Clara. I'm scared of failing all those people who depend on me. I'm scared of my father being right that I'm choosing selfishly. I'm scared that wanting this means I'm a terrible person. You're not a terrible person. You're just a person. She pulled back to look at him. And persons are allowed to want things, even when it's complicated, even when other people don't understand. The gala is tomorrow night. If I don't announce an engagement to someone suitable, the merger dies. I know. So what do we do? Clara thought for a moment, then smiled. We tell the truth. We go to your fancy gala tomorrow night, and when they ask you to make an announcement, you tell them you're engaged to a broke matchmaker from Brooklyn who runs her business out of a condemned brownstone, and then we see what happens. They'll lose their minds. Probably. My father will disown me. Possibly. The merger will definitely fail. Almost certainly. Clara cupped his face in her hands. But you'll be making a choice based on what you actually want instead of what everyone else needs from you, and that counts for something. Adrian thought about his mother in the garden, about Elizabeth making their tiny apartment feel like home, about Sophie asking if he was going to be brave, about 3 years of hiding behind responsibility because it was easier than risking real happiness. Okay, he said. Okay? Okay. Let's do it. Let's tell them the truth and see what happens. He pulled Clara close again, breathing her in, coffee and lavender and something that just smelled like her. But Clara, if this all falls apart, if I lose everything tomorrow night, I need you to know something. What? You'll still be worth it. She kissed him again, slower this time, and Adrian felt something inside him finally settle into place. Not solved, not fixed, but right in a way nothing had felt right in years. They stood there in Clara's tiny office, surrounded by decades of photographs of couples she'd helped bring together. And for the first time since Elizabeth died, Adrian let himself believe that maybe happiness wasn't betrayal. Maybe it was just life, continuing despite everything. And maybe that was okay. Adrian left Clara's office around 5, after they'd sat on her worn couch for 2 hours talking about everything and nothing, what they'd tell Sophie, how they'd handle the inevitable explosion at the gala, whether Clara owned anything remotely formal enough for a billionaire's Christmas party. She didn't, it turned out, which made Adrian laugh harder than he had in months. I have a dress, she protested. It's perfectly nice. When's the last time you wore it? My cousin's wedding, 2 years ago. Does it still fit? Clara threw a couch pillow at him. You're not supposed to ask women that. I'm asking if you need a new dress for tomorrow night. There's a difference. I don't need you buying me things, Adrian. It's not about need. It's about wanting you to feel comfortable when we walk into a room full of people who are going to judge every single thing about you. He caught her hand. Let me do this. Please. She'd argued for another 10 minutes before finally agreeing, and now Adrian was heading home with a plan that felt both completely right and absolutely insane. Tell the truth. Introduce Clara as his fiancée. Watch everything fall apart and hope something better emerged from the rubble. Simple. Terrifying. Honest. Sophie was having dinner when he walked in. Chicken fingers and broccoli that she was systematically avoiding. Daddy! She jumped up, abandoning the broccoli with clear relief. Jennifer made me eat vegetables. Jennifer is wise.
He kissed the top of her head. Can we talk for a minute? Sophie's eyes went wide. Am I in trouble? No, baby, you're not in trouble. I just need to tell you something important. Adrian sat down at the table, and Sophie climbed into the chair next to him, suddenly serious. Remember how I told you I was trying to find someone so I wouldn't be lonely?
Did you find her? Yeah, I found her. He took a breath. Her name is Clara. She's the one who's been helping me meet people, actually. And she's really nice and really smart, and she thinks dinosaurs are cool. Sophie's whole face lit up. Really? Really? And I was wondering, if it's okay with you, maybe you could meet her sometime soon. Like tomorrow? Maybe not tomorrow. Tomorrow's complicated. He didn't want to explain the gala to a 6-year-old. But soon, this week. Would that be okay? Sophie considered this with the gravity of a Supreme Court judge. Is she going to be my new mom? The question hit Adrian square in the chest. I don't know yet, sweetheart. We're still figuring things out. But I like her a lot, and I think you might like her too. Does she like pancakes? I don't know. We can ask her. Does she know about magic leaves? Probably not. You'll have to teach her. Sophie nodded slowly. Okay. But Daddy? Yeah? I don't want you to be lonely anymore, so if Clara makes you happy, then I think you should marry her. She said it with such simple certainty, like happiness was an obvious choice instead of a terrifying risk. Adrian pulled her into a hug, this small, wise person who somehow understood things he was still learning. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just don't notice because you're always working. But she was smiling when she said it, wrapping her arms around his neck. They finished dinner together. Adrian even ate some of the broccoli to set a good example. And then he gave Sophie her bath and read her 3 stories instead of the usual one. When she finally fell asleep, clutching her elephant and looking peaceful in a way that made Adrian's heart ache, he stood in her doorway for a long time, just watching her breathe. Tomorrow night, he'd walk into that gala and blow up everything he'd spent 3 years building. He'd introduce Clara to a room full of people who'd look at her and see someone completely unsuitable. He'd watch his father's face when he realized his son had chosen a broke matchmaker over a merger worth billions. He'd see the disappointment in Morrison's eyes, the shock from investors, the cold calculation from the Lee family as they decided Adrian Keller wasn't worth their partnership. And he'd do it anyway, because Sophie deserved a father who chose happiness over obligation, and Adrian deserved a chance to build something real instead of just protecting what already existed. His phone rang. His father. Adrian answered. Dad. The merger's dead. Charles's voice was flat, emotionless. The Lee family called an hour ago. They've heard you're planning to announce an engagement to someone completely inappropriate, and they're pulling out. How did they? Does it matter? Someone talked. Someone always talks. A pause. Is it true? Are you really going to throw away a $2 billion merger for some woman who isn't even in our world? Adrian walked to the window, looking out at Manhattan glittering below. Her name is Clara, and yes, it's true. The silence on the other end stretched so long Adrian thought his father had hung up. Then, you're making the biggest mistake of your life. Maybe. Or maybe I'm finally making the right choice. 30,000 people, Adrian. 30,000 jobs that will be lost because you wanted to play romantic hero. Charles's voice turned sharp. I hope she's worth watching everything we built collapse. The company isn't collapsing. We'll take a hit, sure. We'll have to make some cuts. But we'll survive. Adrian had spent the last 3 days reviewing Morrison's contingency plans, running numbers, preparing for exactly this scenario. And those 30,000 people? I've already set up severance packages, placement programs, everything we can do to help them land on their feet. It's not perfect, but it's not abandonment. You've already planned for failure. Jesus Christ, Adrian. I've planned for reality. There's a difference. He pressed his forehead against the cold glass. I'm sorry I'm disappointing you. I know that's not what you want to hear, but I am. I'm sorry I'm not the son who does whatever it takes to protect the empire. I'm sorry I'm choosing my own happiness over your approval. But I'm not sorry about Clara. Then you're a fool. Probably. Adrian smiled despite everything. But I'm a fool who's going to try to be happy instead of just successful. And maybe that's worth something. His father hung up without saying goodbye. Adrian stood there for a long time, phone still pressed to his ear, listening to dead air and thinking about all the conversations he and his father had never had. About his mother in the garden, about choices made for the right reasons that led to the wrong kind of life. Then he texted Morrison. The Lee family pulled out. I need you to start executing the contingency plans tomorrow morning. All of them. Morrison's response came fast. Are you sure about this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. For what it's worth, I think your mother would be proud. Adrian stared at that message for a long time. Morrison had known his mother, had watched her fade year by year in that stable, loveless marriage. If he thought she'd be proud, maybe that counted for something. Thanks, he typed back. See you tomorrow. He called Clara. She answered on the first ring. Hey, how'd it go with Sophie? She wants to know if you like pancakes and magic leaves. Adrian sat down on the couch, suddenly exhausted. Also, the merger's officially dead. The Lee family pulled out an hour ago. Clara was quiet for a moment. How are you feeling? Terrified. Relieved. Like I just jumped off a cliff, and I'm not sure if there's water at the bottom or rocks. He rubbed his eyes. My father called me a fool. Are you? Definitely. Good. The world needs more fools who choose happiness. He could hear her smile through the phone. We don't have to go tomorrow, you know. If it's too much, if you want to just skip the whole thing. No. We're going. We're going to walk in there together, and I'm going to introduce you to everyone, and we're going to let them think whatever they want to think. Adrian's voice steadied. I'm done hiding, done choosing what's safe over what's real. Okay, then I'll meet you there. 7 o'clock? I'll pick you up at 6:30. Adrian, I can take the subway. Clara, let me pick you up. Let me do this right. He softened his voice. Please. Okay, 6:30. A pause. I'm scared. Me too. But we're doing it anyway? We're doing it anyway. After they hung up, Adrian sat in the quiet penthouse and thought about bravery. About how it wasn't the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. About how Sophie had understood that at 6 years old, while Adrian had spent 3 years running from it. Tomorrow night would be a disaster. He knew that. But it would be an honest disaster, and somehow that felt better than a successful lie. Monday arrived too fast and too slow simultaneously. Adrian spent the morning in meetings executing the contingency plans, severance packages, job placement assistance, press releases explaining the merger's collapse in language that didn't assign blame. Morrison handled most of it with grim efficiency, occasionally shooting Adrian looks that might have been judgment or sympathy or both. At 4 o'clock, Adrian left for Sophie's parent-teacher conference. Ms. Peterson was young and enthusiastic and clearly loved teaching. Sophie's doing wonderfully, she said, pulling out a folder of Sophie's work. Her reading is above grade level, her math skills are solid, and her creativity is off the charts. Have you seen these stories she writes? Adrian looked at the papers Ms. Peterson spread across the desk. Elaborate tales about dinosaurs who solved mysteries and went on adventures. Sophie's handwriting, wobbly and determined and completely hers. I didn't know she was writing stories. Oh yes, almost every day during free time. She has quite the imagination. Ms. Peterson smiled. She talks about you a lot, you know, about how hard you work, how you're trying to spend more time with her. I am trying. It shows. She's been much happier the last few weeks, more settled. Ms. Peterson closed the folder. Kids know when their parents are present, Mr. Keller. Not just physically there, but actually present. Sophie knows you're trying, and that matters to her. Adrian left the school feeling lighter than he had in days. Sophie was happy. He was trying. Those were the things that actually mattered, not mergers or his father's approval, or what investors thought about his choices. At 6:15, he picked up the dress he'd had delivered to Clara's office, something simple and elegant that hopefully wouldn't make her feel like she was wearing a costume. Then he drove to her brownstone. Clara answered the door in jeans and an old t-shirt, her hair still wet from the shower. I know. I'm running late. She grabbed the dress bag from him. Give me 10 minutes. Take your time. He waited in her office, looking at all those photographs of couples his mother-in-law had brought together. Decades of people who'd found each other against the odds, who'd built lives together that mattered. He wondered if someday there'd be a photo of him and Clara up there, proof that sometimes the matchmaker was the match all along. When Clara emerged 15 minutes later, Adrian forgot how to breathe. The dress was perfect, dark blue, simple lines, elegant without being flashy. But it was Clara herself who stopped his heart. Hair down for once, minimal makeup, looking nervous and beautiful, and so completely herself that Adrian wondered how he'd ever thought anyone else could be the answer. Too much? She touched her hair self-consciously. You're perfect. I'm terrified. Me too. He offered his hand. Ready? Absolutely not. But she took his hand anyway. Let's go anyway. The drive to the gala was quiet. Clara stared out the window at the city passing by, occasionally smoothing down her dress or touching her hair. Adrian held her other hand and tried not to think about what was waiting for them. The venue was the kind of place that made wealth look understated. The Metropolitan Museum, closed to the public for the evening, transformed into a winter wonderland with white lights and ice sculptures and enough flowers to stock a small garden. Photographers lined the entrance, cameras flashing as guests arrived in designer gowns and custom tuxedos. Marcus pulled up to the entrance, and Adrian felt Clara tense beside him. We can still leave, he said quietly. Just say the word. And miss seeing your father's face when you introduce me? Not a chance. She squeezed his hand. Let's do this. They stepped out into a storm of camera flashes. Adrian heard the whispers immediately. Who was she? Where did she come from? Why was Adrian Keller arriving with a complete unknown? He ignored all of it, keeping Clara's hand firmly in his as they walked up the museum steps. Inside was even more overwhelming. Hundreds of people in formal wear, champagne flowing, Christmas music playing softly under the hum of conversation. Adrian felt Clara pause, taking it all in, and he leaned close to her ear. Still okay? Define okay. He smiled despite his nerves. Fair point. Morrison appeared almost immediately, looking stressed. Adrian, we need to talk before... He stopped, seeing Clara. Oh, you must be... Clara?
Hi. Yeah, I'm the reason everything's falling apart. Clara stuck out her hand with remarkable composure. Sorry about that. Morrison's mouth twitched in what might have been a suppressed smile. Richard Morrison. I've been Adrian's attorney for far too long. He shook her hand, then turned back to Adrian. Your father's asking for you. He's in the main hall with the remaining investors. They want to discuss the announcement.
There's not going to be an announcement. Not the one they're expecting, anyway. I know. But I'd suggest you tell them that yourself before they hear it from someone else. Morrison glanced at Clara. Both of you. Rip the Band-Aid off all at once. Adrian looked at Clara, saw her take a deep breath and square her shoulders. Okay, she said. Let's go meet your father. The main hall was set up for dinner. Dozens of round tables with elaborate centerpieces, a stage at the far end where Adrian was supposed to make his announcement. Charles Keller stood near the front with a cluster of men in expensive suits, all of them looking serious and corporate and exactly like the kind of people who'd built empires on ruthless decisions. Charles saw Adrian coming and his expression went cold. Then he saw Clara, and something flickered across his face too fast to read. Gentlemen, Adrian said, stopping in front of the group, I'd like to introduce you to Clara Moretti. Clara, this is my father, Charles Keller, and several investors whose names I'm about to forget because I'm too nervous to remember anything. The investors laughed uncomfortably. Charles didn't. Miss Moretti. His father's voice was ice. I've heard a lot about you.
I doubt any of it was good. Clara met his eyes without flinching. But for what it's worth, I didn't plan this. I was just trying to help your son find what he was looking for. And what was he looking for? Someone who sees him as a person instead of a portfolio. She said it simply, without apology. Turns out that was me. Neither of us expected it. One of the investors cleared his throat. Mr. Keller, perhaps we should discuss the announcement.
There's not going to be an announcement, Adrian said. At least not the one you're expecting. The Lee family has already pulled out of the merger. It's done. So instead of pretending otherwise, I'm going to tell everyone the truth. Charles's jaw tightened. The truth being that I met someone, that I'm choosing her over a business deal, that I'd rather fail at the merger than succeed at building a life I don't actually want. Adrian looked at Clara, then back at his father. That I'm done making decisions based on what everyone else needs instead of what I need. That's very touching, one of the investors said dryly. But what about the 30,000 employees who'll lose their jobs? We have contingency plans in place, severance packages, placement assistance, everything we can do to help them transition. Adrian's voice steadied. It's not perfect, but it's not abandonment either, and it's the best I can do while also choosing to have an actual life. The investors exchanged looks. His father stared at him like he was a stranger. Then Morrison spoke up from behind them. For what it's worth, gentlemen, I've reviewed the contingency plans. They're solid, better than most companies would offer in this situation. Mr. Keller has been preparing for this outcome for days. Preparing to fail, Charles said bitterly. Preparing to be honest. Adrian met his father's eyes. I know that's not what you taught me. I know you think wanting happiness is weakness, but I watched Mom die slowly in a marriage that looked perfect on paper, and I won't do that to someone else. I won't do it to myself, not even to save the company. The silence that followed was suffocating. Clara's hand tightened in Adrian's, and he drew strength from it. Finally, one of the investors, a man named Harrison, who'd been with the company since Adrian's mother was alive, spoke. Your mother was miserable, he said quietly. Everyone knew it. Everyone pretended otherwise, but we knew. He looked at Charles. I always wondered if things would have been different if she'd chosen happiness over duty. That's not relevant, Charles said sharply. Isn't it? Harrison turned to Adrian. I can't speak for the others, but I'm not pulling my investment. Take the hit from the merger, execute your plans, and rebuild. I've seen you do it before. You'll do it again. Another investor nodded. Same. I'm in this for the long haul, not just the next deal. One by one, the investors committed to staying. Not all of them. 2 walked away immediately, heading for the door and presumably their attorneys. But enough stayed that Adrian felt something loosen in his chest. Well, Morrison said into the awkward silence. That went better than expected. Charles turned and walked away without saying a word. Adrian watched him go, feeling the weight of 20 years of trying to earn approval he'd never quite receive. Clara leaned close. You okay? Yeah, I think I am. He squeezed her hand. Come on, let's get this over with. The speech was supposed to happen at 8. At 7:55, Morrison found them and gave Adrian a microphone and a look that clearly said, good luck, you're going to need it. Adrian stood on the stage looking out at hundreds of faces, investors, employees, socialites who'd come for the spectacle, reporters who smelled a story. He found Clara standing near the back, and she gave him a small nod. Good evening, he started, and the room quieted. Thank you all for coming tonight. I know you're expecting me to announce my engagement to someone appropriate, someone who fits the profile of what a billionaire's wife should be, someone who'd help close the merger and make everyone's lives easier. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. But I'm not going to do that, because that would be a lie, and I'm done lying. He took a breath. The merger with the Lee family is dead. It fell through because I couldn't pretend to be something I'm not. And yes, that means we'll take a financial hit. Yes, that means some positions will be eliminated, but it also means I get to build a company based on honesty instead of convenience. Someone in the crowd whispered. Adrian ignored it. 3 weeks ago, I walked into a matchmaking office desperate for a solution to a business problem. I thought I could find someone suitable, announce an engagement, and save the merger. Simple transaction. He found Clara in the crowd again. But I met someone who saw through that immediately. Someone who refused to help me fake a marriage but offered to help me find something real instead. Clara was smiling now, tears in her eyes. Her name is Clara Moretti. She runs a small matchmaking business in Brooklyn. She has no interest in my money or my company or any of the things that usually matter in my world. She just sees me, the scared, imperfect version of me, and somehow thinks I'm worth her time anyway. Adrian's voice cracked slightly. And I'm choosing her, not because she solves my problems, but because she makes me want to be better at solving them myself. The room erupted in whispers. Adrian saw his father standing near the exit, expression unreadable. So if you came here tonight expecting a business announcement, I'm sorry to disappoint you. But if you came here for the truth, here it is. I'm engaged to a woman who makes me happy. The merger failed. The company will survive. And for the first time in 3 years, I'm choosing my life over my legacy. He set down the microphone and walked off the stage, ignoring the explosion of conversation behind him. Clara met him halfway, and he pulled her into his arms right there in front of everyone. That was insane, she whispered against his shoulder. Completely. Your father looks like he wants to murder you. Probably. The reporters are taking about 1,000 pictures right now. Let them. He pulled back to look at her. You okay?
I'm unemployed, Clara said. After that speech, nobody's going to come to a matchmaker who ended up marrying her own client. My business is definitely dead. I'm sorry. I'm not. She laughed, and it sounded free. I hated running that business. I was only doing it to honor my mom, but I'm terrible at it. Maybe this is the push I needed to do something else. Like what? I have no idea, but we'll figure it out. She kissed him, and Adrian heard cameras clicking like crazy. Together.
They left the gala 20 minutes later, escaping through a side exit while reporters shouted questions and guests stared. Marcus was waiting with the car, and neither he nor Adrian said anything about the fact that Adrian was grinning like an idiot. Where to, sir? Home. But can we stop somewhere first? 10 minutes later, they pulled up in front of Clara's brownstone. Adrian ran in and came back with an armful of photo albums from her office, decades of couples her mother had brought together, proof that love could happen in unexpected ways. What are you doing? Clara asked as he loaded them into the car. Saving your legacy, your mom's legacy. He climbed in beside her. We'll figure out what to do with them later. But they matter too much to leave behind. Clara looked at the albums, then at Adrian, and started crying. Happy tears this time, the kind that came from letting go of something you'd been carrying too long. The penthouse was quiet when they arrived. Jennifer had put Sophie to bed hours ago, leaving a note that said she'd seen the news and congratulations, and also please give her a raise. Adrian laughed at that, making a mental note to do exactly that. He led Clara to the living room, and they sat on the couch surrounded by the photo albums, looking through decades of proof that love could work when people actually chose it. Your mom would be proud, Adrian said, studying a photo from the 80s. A couple on their wedding day, looking at each other like nothing else existed. I think she'd be shocked I married one of my own clients. But Clara was smiling. Though knowing her, she probably saw it coming before I did. Are we actually getting married? Or was that just for the speech? I looked at him. Do you want to marry me? Yeah, I really do. He took her hand, not because it solves anything or makes sense on paper, just because I want to wake up next to you and figure out life together, and introduce you to Sophie properly, and make pancakes on Sundays. That's the most unromantic proposal I've ever heard. I'm new at this. I know. She kissed him. Yes, I'll marry you. For all those unromantic reasons and a few romantic ones too. They fell asleep on the couch, still looking at albums, Clara curled against Adrian's side, both of them exhausted and happy and completely uncertain about what came next. Adrian woke up to Sophie standing over them, poking his shoulder. Daddy, why is there a lady on our couch? He blinked awake, disoriented. Clara was still asleep, her head on his chest. This is Clara, remember? I told you about her. Sophie's eyes went wide. The one who likes dinosaurs. We haven't actually confirmed that yet. Maybe you should ask her. As if on cue, Clara stirred, opening her eyes and immediately looking panicked when she saw Sophie. Oh, hi, you must be... I'm Sophie. Do you like dinosaurs? Clara sat up, trying to smooth her wrinkled dress. I don't know much about them, but I'd love to learn. I can teach you. I know everything. Well, not everything, but almost everything. Did you know that pterodactyls aren't actually dinosaurs? They're flying reptiles. Most people don't know that, but I do. That's very impressive. Clara looked at Adrian helplessly, and he smiled. Sophie, Clara and I need to talk to you about something. Want to come sit with us? Sophie climbed onto the couch between them, suddenly serious. Are you going to get married? Would that be okay with you? Adrian asked. Sophie thought about it. Will she live here? Probably, if that's okay. Will she make me eat broccoli? Clara laughed. Only if your dad says you have to. Can she tell bedtime stories? I can try. I'm not sure I'm as good as your dad, though. Sophie looked between them, considering with the gravity of someone making a life-altering decision. Then she nodded. Okay, you can marry her, but she has to meet Mr. Elephant first. He's very particular about new people. I would be honored to meet Mr. Elephant, Clara said seriously. Sophie ran off to get the elephant, leaving Adrian and Clara alone for a moment. That went well, Clara said. You haven't met Mr. Elephant yet. He's tough. I'll win him over. She leaned against Adrian. So this is really happening. We're really doing this. Seems like it. Your father is going to hate me forever. Probably.
The company is going to struggle for a while. We'll manage. I have no idea what I'm going to do for work now that my business is dead. We'll figure it out." He kissed her temple. Together.
Sophie came back with Mr. Elephant and proceeded to conduct a very serious interview where Clara had to answer questions about her favorite color, whether she believed in magic, and if she thought ice cream was a vegetable. Somehow, Clara passed the test, and Mr. Elephant gave his approval in whatever way stuffed elephants approved of things. The rest of the day was spent introducing Clara to Sophie's world. The fort made of couch cushions, the collection of magic leaves, the drawings taped to the fridge. Clara threw herself into it with genuine enthusiasm, asking questions and playing along and somehow understanding that 6-year-olds needed to be taken seriously. By evening, Sophie had decided Clara was her new best friend and proceeded to make elaborate plans for all the things they'd do together. Adrian watched them from the kitchen, making dinner, and felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. Not the desperate kind that came from needing things to work out. The quiet kind that came from choosing something real and trusting it would be enough. His phone buzzed. A message from Morrison. "The board met this morning. They're standing behind you. Charles is out as chairman effective immediately. They want you to present a new direction at next month's meeting." Adrian stared at the message. His father out. After all those years of building the company together, Charles had finally lost the power struggle he'd started the moment Adrian took over as CEO. Another message came through, this one from an unknown number. "This is Harrison. For what it's worth, your mother would have loved Clara. She always said you needed someone who'd call you on your bullshit. H." Adrian smiled, setting down the phone. In the living room, Sophie was showing Clara her dinosaur encyclopedia, while Clara listened with exaggerated fascination. This was what mattered, not boardrooms or mergers or his father's approval. This. Right here. Real and messy and completely imperfect. 2 weeks later, Adrian stood in Morrison's office, signing papers that officially restructured the company. They were smaller now, about 20% of positions had been eliminated despite the severance packages and assistance programs. It hurt, every single job lost, but it wasn't the catastrophe his father had predicted. "We'll rebuild," Morrison said, closing the last folder. "It'll take time, but we'll rebuild." "I know. And Clara, how's she adjusting?" Adrian smiled. "She's teaching Sophie Italian and helping me figure out which employees we can hire back first. Also, she started consulting with other matchmakers, helping them modernize their businesses. Turns out she's good at that." "Good for her." Morrison stood up. "Your father called me yesterday." "What did he want?"
"To know if you were failing yet." Morrison's expression was carefully neutral. "I told him you were doing better than ever. He hung up on me." "That sounds about right." Adrian left the office and headed to Brooklyn, where Clara had set up a temporary workspace in her old brownstone. She was on the phone when he arrived, talking animatedly in Italian to someone, gesturing with her free hand the way she always did when she got excited. When she saw him, her whole face lit up. "Devo andare." Sì. Ti chiamo domani. Ciao." She hung up. "That was a matchmaker in Chicago. She wants to hire me to overhaul her entire client system. Apparently word's spreading that I'm good at this." "You are good at this. Better than I ever was at actually matchmaking." She stood up, stretching. "How'd the meeting go?" "Company's stable. Morrison thinks we'll be back to full strength within 18 months. "And your father?" "Still not speaking to me. But I'm learning to be okay with that." Adrian pulled her close. "How was your day?" "Sophie's teacher called. Apparently she's been telling everyone at school that her new mom is teaching her Italian, and they're going to go to Rome someday." "New mom?" "Her words, not mine. But," Clara looked up at him, "I kind of like it." "Yeah?" "Yeah." She kissed him. "Is that okay?" "It's more than okay." Adrian held her, breathing in the smell of coffee and lavender that he'd come to associate with home. "We should probably actually get married at some point, though. Make it official." "Are you asking me to set a date?" "I'm saying let's not wait. Let's just do it. Something small. Just us and Sophie and whoever matters." Clara thought about it. "Okay, but I'm not wearing white. And we're not doing it in some fancy venue. Somewhere real. Somewhere that actually means something." They got married 3 weeks later on a cold January morning at the bench in Brooklyn where Clara used to sit with her mother.
Sophie was the flower girl, and the only guest besides Morrison, Jennifer, and Marco from the bookstore who Clara insisted had to be there because he'd saved Adrian's book. There was no photographer, no reporters, no guests in designer clothes. Just Clara, in a simple blue dress, Adrian in a suit Sophie had helped him pick out, and vows they'd written themselves about choosing each other every day, even when it was hard. When they kissed, Sophie cheered and Mr. Elephant apparently approved because she held him up like he was celebrating too. Afterward, they had lunch at a small Italian restaurant Clara loved, and Adrian felt more married in that crowded, noisy space than he ever would have felt in the Metropolitan Museum. That night, after Sophie was asleep and they were alone in what was now their penthouse instead of just his, Clara curled up next to Adrian on the couch. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Choosing this over the merger?" Adrian thought about it honestly. "Sometimes I worry about the people who lost their jobs. Sometimes I wonder if I could have found a middle ground. But regret choosing you? Never. Even though your father won't speak to you? Even though." He kissed her forehead. "He spent his whole life choosing duty over happiness, and it killed my mother slowly. I won't make that same mistake. What if he never comes around? Then he doesn't. I can't control that. I can only control what I choose." Adrian pulled her closer. "And I choose you, every time." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, just being together in the quiet penthouse that felt more like home every day. "You know what I think?" Clara said eventually. "What?" "I think people spend so much time trying to make the perfect choice that they forget there's no such thing. Every choice costs something. Every path means giving up other paths. The question isn't which choice is perfect, it's which choice you can live with." "That's very wise. I'm very wise. You should listen to me more often." But she was smiling. "I gave up my mother's business for you. You gave up a massive merger for me. We both chose something uncertain over something safe, and yeah, it's scary, but it's also the most honest thing either of us has ever done." Adrian thought about that, about honesty versus safety, about choosing the uncertain path because it felt right, instead of the certain path because it looked right, about how his mother had chosen safety, and it had killed her slowly, while he'd chosen uncertainty, and it had made him feel alive again. "My mom left me a letter," he said suddenly, "before she died. I found it in her things after the funeral, but I couldn't read it for years." "What did it say?" "That she'd spent her whole life making choices based on what other people needed, and she regretted every single one. That she hoped I'd be braver than she was. That real love wasn't about finding someone perfect, it was about finding someone worth being imperfect with." He met Clara's eyes. "I think she'd really like you. I wish I could have met her." "Me too." They sat there holding each other while outside Manhattan hummed with its usual chaos. Millions of people making millions of choices, most of them uncertain, all of them hoping they were doing the right thing. A year later, Adrian stood in the renovated brownstone that used to house Moretti Matchmaking and now held something new. Clara had transformed it into a consulting space where she helped small businesses modernize and thrive, but they'd kept one wall covered in photos, all those couples her mother had brought together, proof that love could work when people chose it honestly. Sophie ran through the space, showing her new little brother around, even though he was only 3 months old and couldn't understand anything she was saying. But she didn't care. She had a family now, a real one, and she took her big sister duties very seriously. "Daddy, can I show him my office?" Sophie had claimed a small corner of the space as her own, complete with a tiny desk where she wrote her dinosaur stories. "Sure, baby, just be careful with him." Clara appeared with coffee, looking exhausted but happy in the way new mothers did. "I can't believe you let her call that corner an office." "She's learning about entrepreneurship. It's educational. She's 6. Almost 7, and she's already a better writer than half the people I negotiate with." Adrian took the coffee gratefully. "How are you holding up?" "Tired, overwhelmed, wondering how people do this with multiple kids." But she was smiling. "Also really happy. Is it possible to be all those things at once?" "Apparently." The company had recovered, slowly but steadily. They were back to 80% of their previous size, with a new focus on sustainable development that actually meant something instead of just looking good in press releases. Adrian worked less, delegated more, and made it home for dinner most nights. His father still didn't speak to him. Harrison said Charles watched from a distance, reading every article about the company's recovery, but pride kept him from reaching out. Adrian had made peace with that. Some wounds didn't heal, and that was okay. What mattered was what he'd built instead: a marriage based on honesty, a family that felt real, a company that did good work without consuming his entire life. Not perfect, but real. And real was better than perfect any day.
You know what I was thinking? Clara said, watching Sophie carefully hold her baby brother.
What? Your mom's letter, about finding someone worth being imperfect with. She leaned against him. I think that's what we are. Two imperfect people who keep choosing each other despite all the reasons it would be easier not to.
That's pretty much love, isn't it? Yeah, I think it is.
They stood there watching their family. Sophie whispering to her baby brother about dinosaurs, sunlight streaming through the windows of a brownstone that had witnessed decades of love stories, all of them messy and real and completely imperfect. And Adrian realized that 3 years ago, he'd walked into this building desperate for a solution to a business problem. What he'd found instead was something infinitely better, a reason to stop hiding behind responsibility and start choosing the life he actually wanted. The merger had failed. His father wouldn't speak to him. The path forward was still uncertain in 100 different ways, but he had Clara. He had Sophie. He had a son who couldn't even hold his head up yet, but who already had his mother's eyes. He had a company doing work that mattered instead of just work that made money. He had Sunday pancakes and magic leaves and bookstores where he could just be himself. He had a life worth living instead of just a life worth defending. And in the end, that was the only choice that mattered. Not the perfect choice. Not the safe choice. Not the choice that made everyone else happy. Just the honest one. The one he could live with. The one that made him feel alive.